August 2026, a view of the month from an astrological perspective, looking at the main astrological events taking place over the course of a month and doing a forecast for all of the 12 signs, and additionally doing an I Ching reading for August 2026. My name is Archie Dunlop. This is Talking Astrology with Archie, and here is my view of August 2026. So here is the chart for the very beginning of the month. Midnight, New York time, August the 1st, 2026. There's no particular reason why I've gone for New York. I mean, I've got to go for somewhere. So, what does the picture look like as the month opens up? It's kind of like the curtains open on a new act, or perhaps a new play, a whole play. This is August. This is the grand drama, and at the beginning of August, Jupiter is in Leo, and the Sun is in Leo as well. So there's a real Leo emphasis to the month, and of course Jupiter will stay in Leo until July of next year, and so many of us are trying to work out what does it mean for Jupiter to be in Leo, and that depends on our horoscopes, on our individual horoscopes, and perhaps on our sign. So it means different things to different people, but with the Sun in Leo as well, making that conjunction to Jupiter, that really does emphasize, what Jupiter, actually means. It's a very fiery conjunction that the month starts with. And another thing that's happening, at the beginning of the month is that the North Node is moving out of Pisces and into Aquarius. I mean, this is the true node. I think if you set it for the mean node, the North Node would still be in Pisces at the beginning of August. And so the node is kind of, where we should be going. And, when the North Node was in Pisces, for many of us, that might have felt that we need to be perhaps more sensitive, more Piscean, more aware of what's going on an emotional level. But, when the North Node flips into Aquarius, that's very different. Aquarius and Pisces are very different signs. And Aquarius, the sign Aquarius, is perhaps asking us to be maybe more objective, perhaps to be tougher, to be more realistic, to use our brains and not to be carried away by emotional considerations. Additionally, the South Node is in Leo. So when you've got North Node in Aquarius, South Node in Leo, well, they're always going to be opposite each other. But, Leo is kind of where we shouldn't be going. It's the line of least resistance. And, Leo suggests that, it's perhaps easy to put ourselves first, to see everything in terms of ourselves. This is what people do. Even when they claim to be involved in charitable activities or they're campaigning, they tend to see things in terms of themselves. I mean, that seems to be, something very common. And Aquarius is asking for objectivity. Forget about yourself. That's not what it's about. Aquarius is saying, it is the cause. And, individuals are not quite so important. I mean, that is a tough message for some of us. And we do have a year or two to work out exactly what it means as the North Node continues to go backwards through Aquarius. And so, we need to be rational, be logical, but perhaps we have to let go, and we have to realize that it's not all about us. Okay, I'm not saying that you necessarily have to realize that, but I think a lot of other people do have to recognize that. And Jupiter at the beginning of the month, I've just said it's in Leo, But one thing that, and I think this is important, is that through the month of August, Jupiter is moving towards a trine of Saturn. And, the Jupiter-Saturn cycle is very important. It is one of the most important things in astrology. And, we had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at the beginning of the decade. Every 20 years you have a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And, the Jupiter-Saturn cycle, is about the business cycle. It's about society. It's about politics. It can be about geopolitics. And so the Jupiter-Saturn cycle is the beginning of something new. And then what happens is, because Jupiter moves faster than Saturn, is that the cycle unfolds, and you have different aspects as this cycle unfolds. You have the sextile, and then you have a square, and now you've got the trine, and the trine is a fortunate aspect. And usually this part of the cycle is quite fortunate. I mean, you think about, there was a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in around sort of 1961, 1960, something like that. And so, 1967, whenever that trine was, not in the very late 60s, but sort of mid to late 60s, there was a Jupiter-Saturn trine. That was perhaps when the 60s were at their peak, when, things were really moving and swinging. And, likewise with the 80s, you had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at the beginning of the 80s. And, 1986 was, around then, there was Jupiter-Saturn trine, mid to late 1980s. That was the part of the decade where things were at their peak. And of course the 80s were a very different decade. It was all about the stock market and the recovery from the stock market, and people making money, and it was all good, and Reagan was president, and then it went sour. You had the October 1987 crash, but that was the largest one-day fall in the stock market. But by and large, the trine is when things are at their best. Now, you might be saying, Jupiter-Saturn trine, oh, look at what's going on. Everyone is in a state of fear about the economy. You've got a war in Ukraine. You've got war in Iran. Yeah, the whole thing is falling apart. Yet there is this Jupiter-Saturn trine. And it may be that this Jupiter-Saturn trine gives us a glimmer of hope, short term. I mean, I don't think that things are going to stay good forever. Well, are they? I'm sorry, I know they're not good, but I mean, I'm not the only person. I think there are people saying that now is astrologically, it's not such a bad time as it seems to be if you read the news. And it may be that the Jupiter-Saturn trine is going to be protective. It will just keep the system going just for a bit longer. I mean, in the end, we've got a Jupiter-Saturn opposition at the end of the decade. It's not like we can permanently avoid any form of collapse, but I think we can look at this trine in a positive way. And looking at some events taking place in August, or sort of beginning of August, we have Venus moving into Libra. So Venus starts a month in Virgo, then it goes into Libra. I think that's on the 6th, and then, having gone into Libra, Venus makes a grand trine. It makes a trine to Pluto and then a trine to Uranus. So you've got Venus at around 4 degrees Libra, Uranus at 5 degrees Gemini, Pluto at 4 degrees Aquarius. And so you've got these planets coming together, and a grand trine in air signs. And additionally, it's connected with Neptune. So you've got a real outer planet formation there. So you can see the chart here. I know Venus is in Virgo at the beginning of the month. So you imagine Venus moves forward, makes the opposition to Neptune. And so Venus brings together all of these outer planets. And this might be fortunate. I mean, there is a view, again, that it is fortunate, that things can start to work. But I don't know. I mean, it seems to be a bit heavy. But on a personal level, we can, as individuals, tune into something higher for ourselves. And, when you've got Venus, Uranus and Pluto making this trine, it can be about freedom. You think about Uranus and Pluto. What are those two planets about? Wanting to break free. There's something quite revolutionary about it. Revolutionary change, wanting to create a transformation. But because Venus in Libra is involved in it, perhaps it's a change which needn't be as violent as it sounds. Perhaps in that nice, harmonious Libran way, we can engineer a situation where everything does work out and everything really is overthrown. Maybe one way of looking at it is, I don't know, a velvet revolution. Maybe that's just being a bit too optimistic. And of course, Venus is opposition Neptune, and so there is some danger with this grand trine that it could get out of control. Because I know that we're told that grand trines are fortunate, but there is a view that grand trines can be quite dangerous. I mean, particularly grand trines in water, but any grand trine, it's just things might move too quickly. And people get carried away with their own ideas. They want to do something. They want to change the world. And in the process, they could, do something dangerous, and then they have to deal with the consequences. And at the same time, roughly as this grand trine in air signs, we have an eclipse. We have a new moon eclipse, and it's a total eclipse, and I think it's at 20 degrees to Leo. So that is an important event. And let's see, I think I've got the chart here. So here is the chart for the eclipse. I've set it for London. I mean, or Westminster, which is the government district of London. So here's the eclipse on August the 12th. You can see that the sun and the moon are making a conjunction, and you can tell that it's quite a close eclipse, that it's total, because the south node is relatively close to it. Now, it's easy to get excited about total eclipses. And, when you think about an eclipse, you might think, oh God, it's the end of the world. But, I remember a total eclipse in the UK in 1999. I think it was on the 11th of August, 1999. And yeah, people got excited about it. And it was total in the UK. And people were looking at it and they were warned not to look at the sun. I think some people did look at the sun and damaged their eyes. So never look at the sun. Even when it's an eclipse, when you think you can, you can't. You will hurt your eyes if you perhaps permanently if you look at the sun. And so what did that eclipse mean? Well, if you think about the end of 1999, I mean, it wasn't bad if you were invested in the stock market. I mean, the end of 1999 was a stock market boom. You'll come across this phrase, party like it's 1999. Because, there were tech stocks, .com stocks, they just went up massively. And the eclipse kind of ushered it all in. So we shouldn't necessarily say just because it's an eclipse that it's absolutely disastrous. If you follow the 1999 pattern, I mean, maybe this gives further support for the idea that there are some things that may be working. So, with this eclipse, it is in Leo. It's kind of connected with Jupiter and Mercury. I know Jupiter's not exactly conjunct this eclipse, but you've got four planets in Leo plus the South Node, and it is a new beginning. It is a new lunar cycle, and some of us might feel that the beginning of August is just a bit of a nothing. Not much is going on. Some of us might feel like that, and the reason is because August starts when the moon is waning, and so we're having to deal with the old lunar cycle, and we're just waiting for that to end. But here, this new moon eclipse, that could be a new beginning for all of us, and so it could actually be quite exciting. So that's the eclipse, and I think that I don't think that it's necessarily a bad event, this eclipse. So that's what I'm really thinking. I mean, I'm going to look at the eclipse in more detail if if you follow my channel and if you look at when I put up videos, I'm not going to just leave it at that. I will be having another look at it. And moving on into the month, well, one thing you will notice about this eclipse that is important is that Mars has changed sign. It's because Mars started the month in Gemini. It's now at 0 degrees Cancer. It's on the solstice point. And the fact that it's within a degree of the solstice point at the same time as the eclipse should perhaps give us pause for thought. You know, there is a Mars energy to this eclipse because of the fact that Mars is at 0 degrees Cancer. And it could be a new beginning, but there could be a feeling with this eclipse that something quite aggressive is coming into being. And from then on, we have to watch what Mars is doing. We have to track Mars through Cancer because, you know, Mars is at 0 degrees Cancer. Saturn is at 14 degrees Aries. So what that actually means is that Mars is starting to move towards a square with Saturn, you know, over the course of, the rest of the month. And, you know, it's useful to use the lunation cycle, you know, as a way for sort of understanding how the month is unfolding. And so we can look forward to the next lunation, which is the new moon. But before the new moon, you know, the new moon is right at the end. It's on the 28th. We do have planets moving into Virgo. So August starts with a load of planets in Leo, but on the 22nd, 23rd, the Sun goes into Virgo. Then a bit later, Mercury goes into Virgo, and in fact we have a Sun-Mercury conjunction. Mercury is combust at the end of the month. And it's exactly combust. You could say it's a Cazimi conjunction, but it can be problematic. When Mercury is completely overwhelmed by the Sun. That's on sort of the 27th, when we can't quite make sense of things. Mercury is about thought, and so when the Sun is conjunct Mercury, perhaps we can't think straight, and that brings us on to the last lunation of the month, which is the full moon. Here is the full moon eclipse. It's a partial eclipse. It takes place on August the 28th, and so you've got the moon, and it's an eclipse in Pisces, full moon eclipse in Pisces. So there is the moon at 4 degrees 54 Pisces, Sun at 4 degrees 54 Virgo, and it being a full moon, we have to say the usual stuff about full moons. It is a moment of truth, or it can be a moment of truth when we see things for what they really are, and maybe we feel things for what they really are, because the moon is in Pisces. With the moon in Pisces, perhaps we'd been too hung up on the Virgo planets, Sun, Mercury in Virgo, Mercury combust, and we were just looking at things in a very sort of surface way. Then this full moon in Pisces just says, hold on, how does it feel? What does it feel like? And perhaps our feelings are telling us that something's not right, that something needs to change. Another thing about this full moon is that it is square Uranus, and Uranus is the planet of earthquakes, revolutions, drama. So this partial eclipse could be serious. And, I can't really go into great detail about this eclipse right now, because I just haven't got time. This video goes on for long enough as it is, but I think it is perhaps potentially quite a dramatic end to the month. And look at Mars. Mars has moved on. Mars is no longer at 0 degrees Cancer, 1 degrees Cancer where it was at the new moon. It's now at 10 degrees Cancer. So it's applying to a square of Saturn. And this makes me think, Mars-Saturn is a difficult pairing, can be about frustration, things not working, and worse. it can be about concerns about, death and destruction and so forth. So you put this all together. So yeah, maybe August will have quite a challenging end to it. And now I want to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for August 2026. Aries, you go into August feeling pretty good about yourself. You know that you are capable, and I think by and large you have the capacity to enjoy life. I mean, you're seeing evidence, I hope, of what you can do, of what you can achieve. And additionally, there is a certain lightness to you. After all, at the beginning of the month, Mars is still moving through Gemini at a time when Jupiter is moving through Leo. Jupiter, of course, is the planet of expansion, and it's a fortunate planet. And Leo is a sign that Aries can really relate to, and likewise, Mars in Gemini, it's not a bad place for Mars to be. You can use your mind, and I think that you're perhaps more adaptable than usual, and so things are, I think, are looking good, and you're beginning to recognise that the world around you just isn't so bad. Well, even if it is bad, even if people are complaining, that there's a way through. Indeed, whatever happens, if there's a good chance, Aries, that you can take advantage of it. I mean, all you have to do is just apply your natural creativity and zest for life. Now, as the month gets underway, there are a few changes. Venus changes sign. So, Venus starts the month in Virgo, but then, around 6th, 7th of August, it changes sign. It moves into Libra. That's potentially, quite important. Libra is your opposite sign. And so, when Venus moves into Libra, Venus moves into the sign of its rulership. Now, that might well say something about other people, the important people in your life, perhaps. And, you might have assumed that you had some competitive advantage, that, if it came to a struggle, if there was a case of, winners and losers, that somehow you'd win out in the end. Every Aries at some level has a competitive streak, but with Venus moving into Libra, you should not underestimate other people. Particularly if it's sort of a one-to-one situation. It could be a partner, it could be a rival, could even be an enemy. And Venus is in Libra, throughout the month, and so this might mean that people you assumed were going to be reasonable, were going to be easy to deal with, might have a hidden strength. It's not the kind of hidden strength that is sort of advertised. You won't necessarily be dealing with, aggressive, assertive people. It's more like there are certain individuals who have a quiet strength and, in fact, a quiet charm as well. And it may be through that charm that they're able to win out, if it is a competitive situation. But there is another way of looking at it. If you are of a humanitarian nature, you want the best for everyone. You're going to want people to be on good form. And so certain people who might have been down in the dumps, or they might not have been on particularly good form, they might recover very quickly. And so that might mean then that you could actually benefit from another person, a person who might have social skills that in some respects you might be lacking. And additionally, with Venus moving into Libra over the course of August, consider the possibility that someone new might be arriving on the scene. And so don't think that the personnel around you at the beginning of a month is fixed. And look around you, see what additions there are. And if someone new turns up, maybe you've got something to say to them. Maybe you've got something in common, and perhaps they have something you don't have, and you can in some ways benefit. And while Venus is moving into Libra, after approximately the first week of August, we have Mars changing sign. So Mars has been in Gemini for some time, and now it's moving into Cancer. Now I think that is important. So I think it's around August the 11th that Mars moves into Cancer, and Cancer is an important sign. It is a cardinal sign. And so whenever a planet moves into Cancer, likewise when it moves into Aries or Libra or Capricorn, that planet straight away becomes strong. And so Mars moving into Cancer, in some respects, that does highlight you. Mars is on the solstice point, and so you have a certain prominence which you may be able to take advantage of, around the sort of the 11th, 12th of August, and you have something to say, and you can, in some respects, be powerful, in the world. Yet Mars in Cancer, is a bit of a two-edged sword. Mars is fallen in Cancer, because Mars is exalted in Capricorn, so therefore it's fallen in the opposite sign of Cancer. And additionally, to make things really confusing, Mars rules the water signs, all the water signs. And so Mars, in one sense, is strengthened by moving into a water sign, moving into Cancer, but it is potentially weakened by moving into the sign of its fall. And it's nothing is set in stone. But when Mars moves into Cancer, it's quite possible that you become perhaps more emotional than usual. And there is a possibility with Mars in Cancer that you become maybe, I don't know, rather brooding. I mean, that really could be the case. There are things that you increasingly want to keep to yourself, and that does mark a certain contrast, doesn't it? I mean, I think that you are in general looking at things in a longer term sense. In quite a good phase of your life, where you can be optimistic and think the best of everything. But there may be just this shorter period, lasting about 6 weeks, while Mars is in Cancer, where you don't just become more reflective, but you might be thinking about the past and maybe thinking about what has gone wrong in the past. And that brings us back to the concept of brooding. So ask yourself, where are you going with it all? There's no point in brooding for the sake of it. Now, on a more positive note, when Mars is in Cancer, you have an opportunity to get in touch with the past. Sometimes Aries can want to make a break from the past. Aries is the initiator. It's the sign that wants to be in the forefront of everything, be the leader. But sometimes Aries, you have to take a step back, and maybe that's what Mars in Cancer is encouraging you to do. And you have to think about what was going on in the past, and making sure that from an emotional perspective, you are in tune with your environment, and this could say something, about your home. So, how are you feeling in your home? Are you feeling comfortable there? How are you feeling, in terms of your family, if there are family around you, if you are in touch with your family? Now, Mars in Cancer for you, Aries, could be about, getting annoyed with your family, or finding there's something wrong with your home, or something you want to change. And I think it's going to be very important that you kind of remember who you are. You've got to be open, honest, upfront. The sooner things get discussed, I think, the better for everyone. And you don't want to sort of get into a situation, where you feel confused, and you jump to conclusions, and you blame people. This is absolutely not what you want. And if we track Mars through, Mars moves on, and Mars makes a square to Neptune. So at the beginning of the year, Neptune went into Aries, and around 17th of August, something like that, we have a square aspect between Mars and Neptune. And you need to kind of think about what this might mean. So if Mars represents you, Mars square Neptune might be a time where you just feel just a little bit confused. You're not quite sure, what to make of things. And that's sort of more reason why there's a possibility that you just could reach the wrong conclusions. Mars in Cancer square Neptune in Aries, and it's possible, Aries, that you just give the wrong impression. You perhaps you give hints. You try to pretend to be one person, and perhaps you're taken at face value, and then people respond to you in a way that might not be suitable. So if you find people sort of behaving strangely in the mid to late August, don't just say, "Oh, it's not your fault. You were just minding your own business, and then something happened." It might be the kind of energy you were giving out, and it just could be that you haven't made yourself clear, and so that is something that you really need to do. Additionally, Mars square Neptune, if we look at the aspect in its kind of worst case scenario, Neptune is a planet that is often associated with alcohol and drugs, inebriants, and perhaps an attraction to things which are unsavory. And so I would think that Mars square Neptune should really encourage you to, it might encourage you to do things you later regret, and you've got to be as sober as possible when Mars is square Neptune. So avoid anything that might get in the way of your sobriety, and really avoid anything like alcohol, I don't know, non-prescription medicines, chemicals, anything like that. Pollutants in general. I mean, that's what Neptune can be. So, make sure that as far as is possible, you have a clean and healthy life with Mars square Neptune. But on a more sort of positive note, Neptune is a very spiritual energy, and Neptune encourages you to sort of go beyond the bounds of your everyday material existence. And in that case, Neptune is perhaps challenging you to take things further. And so, Mars in Cancer might just be sort of retreating from the world, amazingly. Even though the Sun and Jupiter are moving through Leo, the Sun is moving through Leo until until it moves into Virgo, around the 23rd of August. And so, Sun moving through Leo, that all things being equal is great. I mean, Sun in its own sign. And while all this is happening, you are certainly very, very, very creative. And when you get the chance, you can be a sort of a fun person to have around, and so forth. But that is potential. But I just think that Mars moving through Cancer, might kind of subvert this. You just might be just a little bit too sort of brooding, for your own good, and you might just see everything in terms of yourself and miss out on something important. And Neptune could be something maybe of a collective nature, which kind of is asking for your involvement, even asking for your leadership. Now, you don't normally associate Mars square Neptune with leadership, but with Neptune in Aries, if you've been watching my past videos, I do think that Neptune in Aries is about leadership, but it's the kind of leadership where the calling comes from something beyond yourself. The cosmos is moving in a particular direction. The cosmos needs leaders, and perhaps it needs leaders like you. But right now, perhaps you're not necessarily interested, and maybe it's your choice. I mean, Neptune is retrograde, that is true, and so it could be that you just don't feel up to it. But I just do think there is something there for you, and something to maybe challenge you. And you've got around the 21st, 22nd, you've got Mercury. I think it's the 21st. You've got Mercury making a semi-square to Mars, and that could be the challenge. You having to sort of deal with an idea that you didn't really want to get involved with. It is a challenging idea, but perhaps this is an idea you at the very least need to think about. Now, at the end of the month, of course, the Sun is in Virgo, so around the 23rd, Sun moves into Virgo, and so when the Sun moves into Virgo, perhaps it's time to pull everything together. You've been kind of going in different directions. I mean, you've wanted to be yourself. You kind of wanted perhaps to be dramatic and creative. That was your impulse at the beginning of the month. It's just that as August progressed, you might have been kind of knocked off your path. Maybe you've just taken certain things too seriously. And if you just take something really seriously, and if you're thinking about all the time, or thinking about it all the time, well, really nothing goes on. And with the Sun in Virgo, it might require actually a lot of discipline to deal with that, and to recognize that you have got something that you want to do, that you can do really well, but it requires some organization, and it might even be that you have to sort of snap out of something. Just perhaps you've been a little bit too emotional, and you just need to just concentrate on one thing after another, and be systematic about it, and that might be how the month ends. Well, as far as how the month ends, well, okay, the month ends with a square between Mars and Saturn. Mars in Cancer, Saturn in Aries. And I think I need to say something about that. I think the exact Mars square Saturn is on September the 1st, but by the end of the month you're going to be feeling this aspect. I think that this aspect, does matter. I mean, in a way, I'd kind of like not to talk about it. If I do a similar video for September, yeah, well, I could talk about it then, but maybe I should talk about it now. So, Saturn is in Aries. Saturn is in your sign, and Mars moving through Cancer, square that Saturn in Aries. There could be a moment of real frustration at the end of the month, where you just feel that you are quite stuck, and your immediate impulse is really to do nothing or complain about it. But Saturn is in Aries for a reason, and Saturn in Aries has a somewhat difficult reputation. It is fallen, so you've got Mars fallen in Cancer, square Saturn fallen in Aries, and so you might be faced with a situation which, on at least at first sight, does seem difficult, but it's there for a reason, and you are being asked, I think, to be hyper responsible. I mean, I think you can be hyper responsible. You can decide exactly what needs to be done, and you've got to make sure that your feelings don't get out of control, that you don't exaggerate, and that you just see things at face value. And so, there might be, a real challenge there, but I think it's a challenge that you could, definitely, you can definitely get through. And additionally, at the end of August, perhaps you need to find ways of burning off excess energy in a way that is constructive and is not going to lead to sort of anger and so on. Now, Aries, I really would have liked to have been a sort of more positive, particularly with that last comment about the Mars square Saturn. But I have to be honest about it, and I would also say, as I said right at the beginning of this piece on Aries, Jupiter is in Leo. Even if things are difficult, there is a way through. In fact, it's not just the fact that Jupiter is in Leo. Venus is in Leo as well, and it might well be that the answer, or some of the answers, relate to not just you making a special effort to be positive and constructive, but also seeing what other people have to offer, because you are not alone, and if you make the most of the people around you, then I do think that can make a big difference. Taurus. Looking at August overall, we of course have Jupiter moving through Leo. We also have the Sun moving through Leo, and the Sun will be moving through Leo until it goes into Virgo, which I think is it's around the 23rd of August. And so with both the Sun and Jupiter moving through Leo, it's a time, Taurus, to be thinking about what exactly is important to you. And we might be thinking about quite foundational matters. For example, relating to where you live, what makes you happy, and additionally being able to sort of link with the past. I mean, this is to an extent what Jupiter in Leo is about. Jupiter stays in Leo for nearly a year. I think it leaves Leo, moves into Virgo, I think it's sometime in July of 2027. And so, Taurus, this is a time to think about, what is important, to get your priorities right, and where you live may matter, because, with Jupiter, Jupiter and Leo can be about the home as well as the family, making sure that your home is somewhere that really does nurture you, and if something isn't right in your home, well, think about ways you can make changes. And if you have an idea about how you'd like to live, then, work on that idea. I mean, I'm not sort of advocating that you do anything, completely crazy, that you're completely over ambitious about living arrangements. But if you are sort of down to earth, and if you can be as down to earth as possible, then I think that you can find for yourself a certain degree of security, perhaps a security that you'd been looking for recently, but you haven't quite found. But with the current situation, with the Sun and Jupiter moving through Leo, this is an opportunity to really work out what matters to you. And Jupiter is still making an opposition to Pluto, and this Jupiter-Pluto opposition is across quite an important important axis of your chart. Pluto is in Aquarius, as a sign very much related to your ambitions, and you are looking to take things to a new level, and that can be sort of challenging, and you have to be thinking about not just your ambitions, but focusing on something which is supportive of you, and which can also really move you to something new, and can perhaps allow you to change the environment around you. So perhaps in terms of where you're living, you need to be somewhere where your own quest for power is supported, particularly if you are an ambitious Taurian. Now, the ruler of Taurus is, of course, Venus, and we do have changes involving Venus, at the beginning of August. For one thing, Venus moves into Libra. So Venus has been moving through Virgo, and so it sort of makes this sign change. And when Venus moves into Libra, of course, Venus is in its own sign, and that makes you feel stronger and perhaps happier. But additionally, with Venus moving through Libra, you kind of know what needs to be done. And if something isn't good enough, then you'll want to take action. And, that links maybe with Jupiter opposition Pluto. Jupiter opposition Pluto does give you high standards of yourself. And if you want to achieve everything within your capabilities, then things have got to be right. And with Venus moving through Libra, you kind of might have just a general sort of vision of the way everything around you should be organized, and that vision is all about harmony. So if something feels right, you're going to feel good. If something is a mess, you're not going to feel so good. So you're just going to know, and it's just going to be very natural. Additionally, at the beginning of August, we have got a last quarter moon. So the moon is going to be in Taurus, in your sign, and the sun will be in Leo. So we have the moon in Taurus squaring the sun in Leo, and so this last quarter moon, which is I think it's around August the 6th, something like that, at the end of the first week of August. It's challenging, and it might occur to you with this last quarter moon that something is maybe ready. Perhaps it's something you've been working on, something you've been thinking about, and you're now at the end of a lunar cycle, and it just occurs to you that now is the time. But if you don't act now, then perhaps you might have missed your chance. And if we sort of look at this last quarter moon, part of you, Sun in Leo perhaps, just wants to stick with what you know and what you trust, and might be just wary of doing something which is too different, too radical. Why take risks? Why take the chance of embarrassing yourself? What if you fail? What if you get a negative reaction? But the moon in Taurus is reminding you of yourself and what you can do, and the fact that if you stick with it, you should be able to really see things through and be able to be able to complete it, because this last quarter moon is it's in fixed signs, and once you make a decision to go for something, then I really think that you'll be able to see it through. And when you've got a last quarter moon, of course, that is lining you up for a new moon. And if we talk about new moons, then we have a new moon. In fact, the new moon is a total eclipse. So with that total eclipse is it's around the 12th of August, and it is in Leo. And so you've got total eclipse in Leo. That means you've got the sun in Leo, you've got the moon in Leo, and you've got Jupiter in Leo. And so this total eclipse, it is the beginning of something. I mean, new moons tend to be about beginnings, and you realize that something has changed, and it might well be continuing on the theme of what is security, what is the value of your family. Do you want to create a new beginning for yourself? And if we look at sort of ways in which this eclipse could work out, in the most sort of extreme way, well, it could be that you make the decision that you want to live somewhere else. I mean, I'm not saying that is going to happen, but that's certainly a way it could happen. Or the new moon eclipse could represent the beginning of the realization that you need to move to live somewhere else, or move. Now, it might be that it takes months before you actually make the decision, but the process has perhaps started. But there are other ways of dealing with this new moon. It might be that you look at your living arrangements, how members of your family get on with each other, and it just occurs to you that something has changed and you want something new. It could be about redecoration or making some big changes in your house if you have the resources, the money to do that. So that is certainly a way of doing it. And so I think overall this new moon is quite positive, provided you're down to earth about it, and you're grounded, and it also might link with the past. I mean, I know it's a new moon, but it's a new moon that is about you linking with the past, and perhaps seeing how the past can be developed in the future. So there could really be something of a turning point in the month at the time of the new moon, where really things do start to develop. Now, Venus is of course moving through Libra, and Venus in Libra starts to make a sextile to Jupiter. So Jupiter is in Leo, Venus is in Libra, and on the 17th, Venus makes that exact sextile. Now, that Venus-Jupiter sextile on the 17th of August, I would have said is quite a fortunate event. I mean, after all, Jupiter is the great benefic. It's a lucky planet. So with Venus sextile Jupiter, you can be lucky. Things can work for you, just in a general sense. And and it being a sextile, though, sextiles as an aspect, they are about sixness, 1/6 of the circle, and so that's 2 times 3. So with sextiles, you need a little bit of effort here. So it's not like with the sextile that all of a sudden you're going to suddenly be, super lucky. It's not quite like that. I think that you have to recognize that you're going to have to make a contribution. It doesn't necessarily have to be a huge contribution, but you have to work at it. And it might well be about just being very disciplined. You're working on something, in your own way, perhaps, in your own home. I don't think you have to go anywhere special to benefit from this Venus sextile Jupiter. In fact, it could well be argued that the place you are luckiest is your own home. And that completely fits with the idea of Jupiter being in Leo. And yeah, the Sun will be in Leo as well. So that's a really good aspect, Venus sextile Jupiter. But the thing is that Venus moves on. Venus moves on and it makes an opposition to Saturn. And this opposition to Saturn, Venus in Libra, opposition Saturn in Aries. And it kind of sounds a bit grim, doesn't it? I mean, Saturn can be a difficult planet. And you're working away, you feel you're on the right track, and suddenly Venus opposition Saturn, there could be something of a block. Something seems to stop you in your tracks, and you might be feeling this, I don't know, in the run up to the 21st. Just suddenly things start to become sort of more difficult, and you have to ask yourself, why is this happening? Your first inclination, might be to believe that it is perhaps because of what other people are doing. Someone's getting in your way, and it's easy to blame, but I don't think that blame is the right approach. I think you need to look at yourself, and if you look at yourself, then there may just be something happening or something existing, at an unconscious level that, could well be holding you back. You kind of don't want to do something. You're maybe being stubborn. So it may be sort of unconscious processes are at work. And, it's always good to be aware of these processes. So it could be something that's not in the outside world, something within you that just doesn't want to do something. Taurians can be very stubborn, and because of that, you might damage the luck that I was just talking about with that Venus sextile Jupiter. But I do think that it is unnecessary. And furthermore, when you've got a Venus sextile Saturn aspect, very often what happens is, in the run up to this aspect, as it gets closer and closer, it gets more and more difficult. But then when it becomes exact, there can be a moment of relief, and perhaps that's what you're going to feel, on the 23rd, and then a bit later, on the 22nd or 23rd, we have got the Sun changing signs, the Sun moving into Virgo, and I think that the Sun in Virgo, is going to work for you. It's a good way to end the month. Of course, the Sun is always in Virgo at the end of August, and Virgo is an Earth sign, and so as a Taurian, I think that you respond quite well to that Virgo energy, and you're perhaps sort of a little less introspective, you're a little more more positive, and you can start to think about, what exactly you can do. And you want to do things properly. That's true. But I think that, once you apply yourself to something, then, I think that you can get sort of, real satisfaction. Yeah, okay, nothing necessarily dramatic, but you're still feeling that things are starting to go your way. So what I'm saying is that there might be a bit of a wobble around August the 21st, but or perhaps in the run up to August the 21st, but I think that things will improve. Yet in the last few days of August, things could be a bit strange, a bit unusual, and it's probably not going to be your problem. Maybe just something that you can ignore, but there could be some excitement, some confusion. Other people may not quite know what's going on, and they may want to draw you in. They may want your input, or it just could be some drama that you have a choice over. Do you want to get involved in the drama? I mean, you could get involved in the drama. Maybe you can sort things out. Maybe you can be of assistance. But alternatively, you may decide that this is not a situation you want to get involved with. And, the last aspect of the month, pretty much, is a Mars square Saturn. In fact, I think that Mars square Saturn is exact on September the 1st. And this Mars square Saturn, it could be about someone else's issues, someone else's problems. And does it have to involve you? It doesn't. But you might nonetheless feel a certain responsibility to do something about it, or at least to give some advice or some kind of assistance. Gemini. At the beginning of the month, you're feeling quite good about yourself. Things are definitely getting better. And, recently you've had Mercury moving through Cancer. Okay, Mercury is still moving through Cancer at the beginning of August. And, Mercury's been in Cancer for a long time, probably too long. And, Mercury in Cancer, well, Cancer is one of the mute signs, at least traditionally known as the mute signs, the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio and Pisces, because the animals associated with the three, whether it's crabs, scorpions, fish, traditionally they don't make much noise or any noise. And so while Mercury was in Cancer, you just perhaps felt that you weren't fully able to express yourself. There are times that you perhaps had to keep quiet, and that wasn't to your liking. And so 23rd of July, Mercury went direct, and it went direct in the sort of central decanate of Cancer, and the central decanate of Cancer is ruled by Mercury. So Mercury actually has some strength in the middle of Cancer, and that's what you were sort of going into August with. Perhaps there was a certain sense of recovery, that things were slowly starting to improve. And at the beginning of August, we have two sign changes, and both these sign changes I think work in your favor. So we have got Venus moving into Libra, and in the end we've got Mercury moving into Leo. So Venus moving into Libra, Venus is a fortunate planet, a planet associated with, other people and relationships. And when it moves into Libra, it's in an air sign. Gemini is an air sign. Libra kind of makes a trine, starts making a trine to Uranus, starts making a trine to Pluto. So in fact we've got an air grand trine forming the moment Venus changes sign. So that is certainly good news. and you can just be just more natural, just more relaxed, and I think it's going to just be easier to get people to like you and to enjoy yourself in other people's company. And so that looks good. And then we have got Mercury changing sign. So Mercury changes sign on August the 9th. So Mercury changes sign August the 9th, moves into Leo. And that sign change matters for a couple of reasons. Firstly, Mercury's out of Cancer, and that is certainly a relief. Secondly, when Mercury moves into Leo, it is in the same sign as Jupiter, and Mercury is getting closer and closer to Jupiter, and it makes a conjunction to Jupiter on August the 14th, and that's just plain lucky. And as far as the specifics of that luck are concerned, it may be that you are lucky doing something relatively low key. It could be that you are visiting somewhere that is close by, or you're going on a short trip, or you're maybe talking to your neighbors or something like that. It's just in your locality, and something might happen. You might be told something. You might be able to discover that there is an opportunity, but you have to make yourself available. With Jupiter, it's very important that you put in the effort. Jupiter hates laziness. That is part of a problem with astrology. You see Jupiter transit. Oh, that's great. Luck is going to come your way. Nothing you have to do. But of course, it never works like that. We just wait for the luck, and we end up being disappointed. So, if you see any possibility of an opportunity, but any possible chance that something could work for you in early August, and especially once Mercury moves into Leo, do be ready to take advantage of it. And with Mercury conjunct Jupiter, this can actually be very good for relationships, because Mercury is ruler of Gemini. Gemini is your sign. Jupiter is ruler of Sagittarius, your opposite sign. So logically, when Mercury and Jupiter come together, form a conjunction, you could say that that means that a relationship comes together, and you and someone else find a way of relating to one another. And that could be someone you're already in a relationship with, that you somehow find a new way of being. You're able to get closer together. Perhaps you're able to resolve an old argument, or it just could be someone just completely new. And it all perhaps starts with a conversation. It's very communicative. Through talking, you get closer to someone, and so that might be how it works. It may not just be about relationships. Gemini, you are a clever person, but you could always know more. There are always things to learn, and you have the opportunity to learn from other people, with Mercury and Jupiter being in the same sign. They don't even have to be conjunct. So don't think you know everything, and just try to explore what other people know. Indeed, what other people might be able to teach you. Now, as far as the Grand Trine is concerned, Venus at the beginning of Libra makes a trine to Uranus and Pluto. So you can see that on the 10th. It's 10th of August. Venus in Libra makes a trine to Pluto, and then on the 11th it makes a trine to Uranus. Now, this is important for you because this grand trine is in air signs, and you've got Uranus in Gemini, and so you can see Venus not necessarily just as a planet of love. You might see it as something more universal, some universal force which brings together Uranus and Pluto. So you have Uranus in Gemini. Uranus in Gemini is about you as an individual. And you've got Pluto trine Uranus. So you're an individual for sure, but you have some kind of destiny that might be represented by Pluto in Aquarius, something that you are meant to do. Yes, you're meant to be original, but you're meant to be an original in a way that accords with, if you like, the universal plan. And so when Venus makes that trine to Uranus, trine to Pluto, it brings it all together. And so there could be a moment where you understand why you are different, why you are special. And it just comes together. It might actually be quite inspirational. You have an idea. Now, that idea might happen because of someone else's input, maybe, or you meet someone and someone inspires you, or they say something accidentally, but you just get this feeling that you are on the right track. And, because it's a grand trine, we get the idea of things moving quickly, without any resistance. One idea leads to another, and your ability to just understand the world around you, indeed to understand the universe, is just much more powerful than usual. And so, I would really urge you to sort of take advantage of this. This is all happening. Around 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, a lot of planets, at around 5 degrees of the sign. So I think that this does look pretty exciting. Additionally, we have got Mercury sextile Venus. I think that's on the 13th. And so Mercury sextile Venus, again, it's just another good aspect, and it allows you to just understand who you are, and it also allows you to discuss what you're good at. So if you've got something that you where you have sort of expertise, just tell people about it. They want to know. You might not think they want to know, but I think they do. And from an artistic point of view, Mercury sextile Venus, is a great aspect. So you definitely have something original to contribute, and it may be that there is a benefit here. I mean, it's possible that you could be rewarded for what you can do, for what you indeed can do well. So that's the first part of August. I think it does look pretty good, and I would have said that the most important part of a month are those sort of dates from, say, the 9th through to the 14th. So that's perhaps what you really should be focusing on. And later on, there's been so much going on around that time, but the question then is, how do you put it all together? It's all very well having, just lots of ideas, lots of events can happen, you can be excited, but how long is it going to last? Is there a possibility that you just, lose the moment? And that's where a trine between Mercury and Saturn comes into play. So on the 17th, Mercury in Leo is making a trine to Saturn in Aries. And so, Saturn can be an organizing principle, and you can get an idea about what you should do to make things permanent. And it might be that the people around you could be helpful. And if people knew what you could do, if you could be sort of open about, your various abilities, I think that you might find that you get support and encouragement that can, really, take you through. And so I'm kind of optimistic during that middle third of a month that you can really get yourself together. But there will be times when you might feel somewhat annoyed. I mean, there are always annoyances, and on the 21st we have Mercury making a semi-square to Mars. So Mercury semi-square Mars is Mercury semi-square Mars. I mean, what's that about? Mars is Mars can be an annoyance. It can be something sort of winding you up, and there might well be a temptation to just get annoyed about something for no particular reason around the 21st. Something is aggravating you, but I don't want to turn it into a big deal. But what you don't want is for things to be spoilt, and you need to be as cool and calm as possible, and you want to have that sort of inner confidence. And looking at what's going on later on in the month, well, on the 23rd, or it could be the 22nd, 23rd, we do have the Sun moving into Virgo, and it's happening shortly before Mercury moves into Virgo. So I think Mercury moves into Virgo around the 25th. So those two planets moving into Virgo could well be quite grounding. You've had a lot of activity in Leo, and there's been a lot of things to do, a lot of things to say, but when you start getting that Virgo influence, you have to start to think about what is important. Perhaps you've just taken on too much, and you have got to think about really what does matter to you. And so by the end of the month, you may find that you are spending sort of more time, or wanting to spend more time in somewhere safe, somewhere perhaps sort of domestic, somewhere that you know well, and you may be sort of more reluctant to take on new challenges. I mean, the challenges are certainly going to exist, but you might have your doubts. But then the question is, how far do you go? How suspicious should you be? I mean, you've certainly got to look after your own interests. Yet on the 27th, is it 27th, 28th? We've got a partial eclipse, haven't we? Yeah, we've got a partial eclipse on the 28th, and this partial eclipse is in Pisces, and so it's a full moon partial eclipse. So you've going to have the moon in Pisces and the sun in Virgo. So you see the challenge here. You've got the sun in Virgo. So the sun in Virgo is kind of saying, oh well, you just like to play it safe. You've had enough. But the moon in Pisces is kind of challenging you. The moon in Pisces is saying, well, have you really gone as far as you could? Maybe you could be taking things further, and there may be an opportunity at the end of August which perhaps you can't be bothered with, or you'd like not to be bothered with. But if you're honest with yourself, it might actually be there for the taking. And so this sun-moon opposition, this full moon partial eclipse, is making you sort of balance, on one hand, your need for comfort, but also with your need to be ambitious. You've had, the last couple of years, you've had the North Node moving through Pisces, through a very high-profile section of your chart, and hopefully over the last year or two, you've had a strong sense of what is important to you. You know, now that the North Node is, you know, leaving Pisces, moving into Aquarius, you perhaps have learnt the lesson. And, you know, this full moon is perhaps a culmination of it. You know, here you see what can be done. And in a way, there is a sense of obligation here. You know, you can't play it entirely safe. You can't necessarily take the comfortable route. And if you can sort of address the challenge of the full moon and do what is required of you, then, you know, I'm confident that you will be rewarded. And, you know, at the same time as this full moon, or around about the time of this full moon, you know, we have the Sun conjunct Mercury. So, you know, Sun conjunct Mercury, you know, that is an aspect that matters. You know, Mercury is your ruler. It is conjunct the Sun, and, you know, this is you know, taking place in Virgo. So when the Sun is conjunct Mercury, there might be something getting in your way, something just obscuring the facts of the matter, and it just may go back to what I was saying about the full moon. You know, you can try your hardest to be forward thinking, and in theory, you might think, okay, you see an opportunity, you'll go for it. But the Sun conjunct Mercury might represent the past. Something from the past is dazzling you. You know, you should be thinking about the future. You know, especially you're a Gemini. You know, you really should be, but you might not be. And you might just be thinking that something from the past is just easier. And, you know, it's just easiest to sort of stay where you are. You know, it's like in that old sort of black and white film, what was it called? It was called Billy Liar. I think it was a 60s film. And, you know, the hero, Billy Liar, you know, he had all these fantasies about all the stuff he was going to do. And at the end of the film, he was in a train station, and I think he was some town in northern England. I mean, it's a very long time since I've seen the film, and he was going to go on a train and go to London, and London was where all the action was, where he could perhaps really fulfill his potential. And he'd bought his ticket. He was sitting in the carriage, and he'd found an attractive girl to talk to, like, you know, everything was fine. And then he just decided, he said to the girl, "Oh, I just want to get some milk," he said. He just wanted to get some milk just as the train was leaving. And he was ready to go to London. Then he went to get the milk. But by the time he'd bought the milk, the train was leaving the station. So it was like he'd lost his chance. So you don't want to be like Billy Liar. You know, there is an opportunity, but part of you doesn't want to take it at an unconscious level. You'd perhaps prefer to stay where you are, but that would be a shame. And so, Gemini, you know, you are a forward-looking sign. You've got Uranus moving through Gemini, so you really make the most of it. And if you see that opportunity, even if it's not necessarily an easy opportunity, I would really suggest that you take this opportunity. Cancer. The month starts with Mercury moving through Cancer. You know, so, you know, Cancer, the Cancer season is quite extended, and, you know, Mercury has, you know, been in your sign for ages, and, you know, I think now, beginning of August, you know, Mercury is pretty strong. It's right in the middle of Cancer. I mean, okay, it's not quite in the middle because it's now gone direct. In fact, it starts the month at 19 degrees Cancer, and so you're perhaps you're in good shape, but you're perhaps ready for a change. The Sun has already left Cancer, and, you know, you're still able to communicate and think very well. You know, and when I say communicate, you know, I'm not just talking about talking. Communication takes many forms, and, you know, with Mercury moving through your sign, I think that you're able to communicate, through your feelings, through your vibes, your aura, your body language, and I think it's generally quite easy for you to sort of get your message across, for people to understand you. And so, that's certainly good, I think, that Mercury is moving through Cancer and still moving through Cancer at the beginning of a month. But, things don't last forever. And Mercury does move out of Cancer on the 9th of August. And so, that is a change. Mercury moving into Leo, because on the 9th, then you're going to have Jupiter's in Leo, Sun is in Leo, and now Mercury is in Leo. And so that really does put the emphasis on the sign Leo. And just before Mercury moves into Leo, we have Venus moving into Libra. So that's, I think, it takes place on August the 6th. And both those sign changes, Mercury into Leo, Venus moving into Leo, Venus moving into Libra, do perhaps slow things down to an extent. They mean that you want to be more in control. You are not necessarily looking for variety necessarily. I mean, I know that variety is important to everyone, including Cancerians, but you understand there are other things to think about. And when Mercury moves into when it joins Jupiter and the Sun in Leo, this could be a time when your attention is turns to sort of important things, like, for example, money. I mean, I know money is rather tedious, but it's something that cannot entirely be avoided. And when Venus moves into Libra, Libra is a sign that is right at the bottom of your chart. And Venus is a sign also Venus is a planet which is also about aesthetics and what things look like. And it could be that while Venus is moving through Libra, and it stays in Libra for the rest of August, it could be that you become very tuned in to things like beauty and what things look like, and that may say something about your attitude to your home. You may have another look at the four walls of where you live, and they might seem somewhat ugly and displeasing, and so maybe you're going to want to make some changes. And I think that it might be a good idea to make those changes, provided they're not going to be too expensive, and you don't want to spend money you can't afford. But with Venus in Libra, it's possible that Cancerians with any involvement with real estate and property could benefit. I think you'll just have a natural concept of what is good, and I think you can look at a property potentially and be able to make a good judgment. But aesthetics is going to matter. And also with Venus in Libra, it may say something about your family, and don't ignore your family. And it might be a time when many Cancerians can create unity within your family, or at least people can get on. And what if people hadn't got on? What if there had been family issues in the recent past? Well, Venus in Libra could allow you to be a peacemaker, to bring people together, or perhaps to look at your own attitudes. If you have recently decided that another member of your family is beyond the pale, maybe you need to sort of have another look at that decision. And so the concept of domestic and familial harmony, I think, is going to be pretty important once Venus moves into Libra. And don't forget that Venus is moving towards a sextile of Jupiter, and so that kind of emphasizes it even more. You put the effort into creating harmony at home, and I do think that you really can be successful. Now, we do have an eclipse on the 12th of August, and this eclipse eclipse is, what's it, a new moon total eclipse, is that right? Yeah, and that is at 20 degrees Leo. And so this eclipse, this new moon eclipse, takes place in the sign following Cancer. And this eclipse could say something about money. It might represent a new chapter in terms of how you see money. Perhaps you'd been complacent in the past, or you hadn't been thinking about money. You kind of knew vaguely that it was important, but with this new moon, it could be perhaps a new way of making money, a new way of organizing your money. So if the eclipse happens and you don't see anything see anything going on, if you don't see any opportunities, well, try, give it a go, and you should be, further helped once when Venus makes a sextile to Jupiter on the 17th. So this sextile is lucky. I think it's lucky for everyone, but I think it's particularly lucky for you, in terms of money and security. So if you feel that things haven't been going right for you, then I think that you can change things around. You can change the situation, and if something is conceivably available, then I think Cancer, it will be available to you. So moving on, and that Venus sextile Jupiter, certainly good news, I believe. But Venus progresses through Libra, and then it makes an opposition to Saturn. Now this Venus opposition Saturn takes place on the 21st, and quite possibly it's the most difficult aspect of the month. I mean, it's a short-lived aspect. I wouldn't worry about it too much, but it's potentially a disturbance. So you are looking for peace. You want things to be working. You want things to be running smoothly. You don't want any arguments. You value your own peace of mind. But then Venus opposition Saturn, just something crops up, something that bothers you. Now, that might be pressure from the outside. This would especially be the case, for example, if you were working, because Saturn might represent an authority figure, as someone who tries to, tell you what to do. It may not be a person, it may be an organization, maybe, I don't know, someone you work for, but they're just perhaps creating problems for you. And your first impulse might be just to get annoyed, to feel that, your peace of mind is being just unnecessarily disturbed. But, this Venus-Saturn opposition could be a valid challenge, something that you need to be aware of. And, maybe you've been a bit complacent, ever so slightly lazy, or you just hadn't been bothered, and there's just something that you need to pay attention to. And Saturn, it could be a difficult influence, but it could be something that is needed. You're being reminded of something. And so if that reminder comes your way, perhaps it's a reminder that you need to pull your weight. You need to maybe sort of demonstrate your own authority. So you might sort of blame other people for being too authoritarian. But what you're really saying is that you have your own inner authority figure that you're not recognizing. And perhaps this Venus opposition Saturn is kind of almost demanding that you take control, that you actually make some effort to impose your will, not in a totalitarian way, but because it's necessary, because you know best. And, very often Cancerians do know best. Now, at the end of August, we have planets moving into Virgo, And I think, there's just been rather too many planets in Leo for your liking, and so having the Sun moving into Virgo, and then we have Mercury moving into Virgo, it perhaps takes the pressure off you, and I think you're perhaps feeling a little more relaxed for the moment, and maybe you can just deal with your own capacity for authority, and you're just able to sort of go with the flow more. And I think that it certainly facilitates you in terms of communication, and I think that you'll have a lot to say for yourself. But all the while, Mars has been moving through Cancer. It's kind of difficult to keep track of these things, and in fact, Mars moved into Cancer on quite earlier in the month, sort of on the 11th. So that's something quite important. I should have probably mentioned it a bit earlier in this piece, but Mars is a quite aggressive planet. It's quite an assertive planet, and so when Mars moved into Cancer, you'll increasingly feel that you do need to assert yourself. You do need to take control. And I think that while Mars moves into Cancer, you might have been in denial of it. You were saying, well, it could somehow be ignored. You don't really want to be in control. You don't really want to be the one having to make the decisions. And you saw with Venus opposition Saturn, okay, that Venus opposition Saturn did not directly involve Mars, but there was a feeling of pressure that you were perhaps obliged to do something, and obliged to pull your weight, but you didn't really want to. And so as Mars goes through Cancer, it starts making some relatively important aspects. I mean, it makes a square to Neptune on the 17th, and it makes a square to Saturn right at the end of the month. I think technically it's on September the 1st. And so that Mars square Neptune in the middle of August could be about you feeling that you did want to do something. You kind of wanted to assert yourself, but it just felt like too complicated. Neptune, I mean, you don't normally associate Neptune with authority, but I am of a view that with Neptune in Aries, Neptune in Aries is about leadership. It's about the desire for leadership. It's about everyone's desire for leadership, and who is going to be the leader. And maybe you can be the leader because you perhaps know what you're doing. Maybe you really do know what you're doing. And if you were to sort of channel that Mars in your sign with Mars square Neptune, you might actually have quite an impact. It might surprise you. But that Mars square Neptune, that might be a challenge you want to duck out of, and perhaps you'll want to wait until the end of the month. And at the end of the month, we've got Mars square Saturn. It sounds bad, doesn't it, Mars square Saturn? I don't think it's bad at all. I think it's a very constructive way to end the month for you, Cancer. So you'll have Mars in Cancer really energizing you, and Saturn in Aries, that is your direction. It is what is important to you. And with Mars square Saturn, it's okay. It's not an easy aspect. It's quite tough. And if you do nothing, you might experience that toughness from the outside world. You might be on the receiving end of toughness, of restricting influences. But you have a choice. If you really grasp the power of that Mars square Saturn, you take ownership of that Mars square Saturn, then at the end of the month and into September, Cancer, you can really be a very, very powerful person, someone who is just impossible to ignore, and you can make things happen, and you can create order, because deep down you know how things should be organized. You have a clear sense of right and wrong. So it does look powerful, and I think Cancer, that it's a challenge that you can very much handle. Leo, it is your month. August starts with Jupiter in your sign, and also the Sun is in this sign as well. So this does give you, a great deal of strength and confidence. Now, you could say, well, I mean, the Sun is always in Leo in August, at least, the first 3 weeks or so of the month. But, this time it is different because Jupiter is in Leo as well. And, Jupiter works pretty well in Leo. After all, Jupiter is one of the rulers of the fire signs. I think the general tradition is that Jupiter rules the fire signs by night, and the Sun rules the fire signs by day. And here we have, the Sun and Jupiter both in the same sign, and I would regard this as being, entirely positive. And the month starts with a conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter. So, this conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter, okay, it might be, a bit close to comfort. There is this idea in astrology of combustion, that if a planet gets too close to the Sun, it kind of gets a bit burnt. But, this conjunction was exact at the end of July. And so by the beginning of this month, the Sun is separating from Jupiter. You are getting a bit of objectivity here. Perhaps at the end of July, maybe you were a bit too full of yourself, and you might have believed that you had all the answers, and okay, there could have been a touch of arrogance, but nothing to worry about. And now it's a case of enjoying what is going on, and not being lazy as well. That very much is important, because it is a time of power. Now, at the beginning of the month, we do have two sign changes. We have Venus moving into Libra on I think that's the 6th. Is that the 6th? The 6th or the 7th? I think it's the 6th of August, and then on the 9th we have got 9th of August, we've got Mercury moving into Leo. So when Mercury moves into Leo, then that means that you will have three planets in this sign, and that I think is something that really does give you a lot of strength. And as far as Venus moving into Libra, well, Venus moving into Libra, I think, is perhaps a relief. Venus in Virgo is, not necessarily the best place for Venus. And, while Venus was moving through Virgo, the last part of July and into Libra, it might not have always been easy. Perhaps you were concerned by the wrong things, or you found yourself, having to be worried about material matters, whether it was work or money, or what was owed to you, whether you were earning enough, and it was a bit irritating. And when the Venus moves into Libra, and it stays in Libra, for the rest of the month, it just feels better, and I think that you're better able to be yourself, and to and also to tell everyone who you are, what's on your mind, and you can also perhaps be more curious and think about the various possibilities that might be available. And with Mercury moving into Libra, you've had Mercury moving through Cancer, and it's just gone on for too long. And with Mercury moving through Cancer, there just might have been times when you weren't just fully able to be yourself, and you had to perhaps keep things back, and maybe you found yourself being secretive. I don't think you particularly enjoyed being secretive, but you were just concerned that you wouldn't be paid enough attention. And while Mercury is moving into Leo, something else is happening, and Venus is making a grand trine in air signs. So on the 10th, Venus makes a trine to Pluto. On the 11th, Venus makes a trine to Uranus. So this grand trine in air signs, Venus, because you've got Venus in Libra, Uranus in Gemini, Pluto in Aquarius. This grand trine, is quite exciting. And things are moving, and you might actually realize that there are possibilities which not so long ago you didn't realize existed, but they do exist. And perhaps by being adventurous and maybe just trying things out, talking to people about new subjects, or talking to new people about new subjects, just seeing what's available. And once things get going, I think that things will start to really happen. And I think this grand trine is sociable, and you are now sort of able to be more sociable, because Mercury is moving into your sign, so you can talk about most things, and you can just enjoy what's going on. But in the process, there might be opportunities. Something might happen. Something might occur to you, and you might then feel that there's a growing sense of your own power. And while all this is happening, the sun and the moon are getting closer together, and then we have a total eclipse on the 12th. We have a total eclipse at 20 degrees Leo. So when you sort of hear total eclipse, that might sound a bit scary. An eclipse. What is eclipsed? Are you being eclipsed? I don't think it need be a big deal. This eclipse, not necessarily. At least on an individual level. I remember. A long time, 1999. I remember the eclipse. I think it was August the 11th, and when I was in the UK, August. I think it was August the 11th, 1999. Everyone got really excited about this total eclipse, that you were able to see something, and it was. And I tried to look at the eclipse and see what was going on without blinding myself. Obviously, if there's an eclipse, you never ever should look directly at the sun, because you could damage your eyes. I think some people did damage their eyes in London trying to see the eclipse. But I was kind of aware. I saw this sort of black arc. I don't know if I don't know quite why that happened. But there was this black arc across the sky. It was a very sunny day, and I saw that black arc. I don't know why that happens in an eclipse. But what did that eclipse actually mean? I mean, if you look at the events in the last few months of 1999 that were ushered in by that eclipse. Well, the main event was just the stock market went crazy. It was, the sort of tech shares, .com shares, went completely parabolic. And I don't think there was too much instability in other parts of the world. I mean, 1999. At the beginning of 1999, you had. I don't know, did you have stuff going on in the former Yugoslavia? There might have, nearly been a nuclear war between India and Pakistan sometime in 1999. But if my memory serves me right, that total eclipse in 1999, if anything, if you were into the stock market, would have been quite favourable. So going back to this eclipse, this eclipse in your sign, I think you could see it, Leo, as just being a new beginning. I mean, that is a standard way of looking at new moons. Things have been developing. You've seen Jupiter, Mercury, the Sun go into Leo, and this is a time where you start to see what is possible. And don't forget that Jupiter went into Leo quite recently. And if you've been watching my videos, you will know that I have been incredibly positive about Jupiter in Leo, particularly for Leos. This is a time when you can be lucky. Jupiter stays in Leo until, July of next year, 2027. And so this eclipse really makes it all happen. And so I'm, quite excited about this new moon. I mean, excited, well, for you. I think it can work for you. You can say, goodbye to the past and really enjoy the Leo season. I mean, you could say that this new moon eclipse is, if you like, the peak of the Leo season. I mean, it doesn't get much more Leo than that. So, I would, urge you to, very much take advantage of it, because, as I said, it's not going to last forever. And there may be a couple of events to think about on the way. So on the 14th, we've got Mercury conjunct Jupiter in Leo. I mean, again, another great aspect. This is a time, middle of August, when you just have a clear sense of who you are. And as a Leo, that is important. You can have a sort of a pride in yourself, and also a pride in what you can achieve. And at the same time, Venus is making a sextile to Jupiter, on the 17th. He says, it's all happening. Venus sextile Jupiter. Jupiter in Leo, Venus in Libra. You basically can really push out your positivity and let everyone know that you are enthusiastic, that you are keen, that you are really sort of ready to make things happen. And moving on into the month, and there comes a stage when you've had your peak Leo, and then things do start to move out of Leo. We have the 22nd, 23rd. We've got the Sun moving out, moving out of Leo and moving into Virgo. So when the Sun moves into Virgo, this is perhaps a time to just take stock of what has been happening. Now, Jupiter, don't forget, it's always going to be in Leo. That's staying there. You're going to continue to benefit from Jupiter's presence, but with the Sun and then the Mercury moving out of Leo and moving into Virgo, you've got to work out then, what actually needs to be done. How do you put it all together? It's a situation where you can certainly see the potential. You can see what you can achieve, but what are you going to be able to? Well, how are you going to be able to see it through? That's my dog. My dog has found something to bark at. Now, she, by the way, she is a Leo, so I'm talking to her as well. So August should be a great a great month for my dog. She was born on August the 5th. She's got a moon in Scorpio though, so she can be a bit of a problem sometimes. She does take herself rather seriously, as many Leos do. Though it is important to have a sense of humour. I don't think my dog has much of a sense of humour. But anyway, last part of the month, with planets, with Sun, Mercury moving into Virgo, you have to make sure that you are able to maintain the situation. Perhaps maintain your good luck. Once you started something, can you see it through? And you have to think about, do you have the resources? Do you have what it takes? You might, for example, have convinced yourself that the only way you can do something is if you are, I don't know, financially secure, or whether you've got support from other people, and you might think without that, well, you can't do anything. But such a view would, I think, be mistaken. There is always a way to do something, if it is right for you, and it's not just a financial issue. I think that you do have what it takes, and you just shouldn't let money be a showstopper. And one of the aspects that perhaps you need to be thinking about right at the end of August is a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. So there are a couple of ways of looking at the Sun-Mercury conjunction. Now, you could say Sun-Mercury conjunction. But the Sun is your ruler; it's conjunct Mercury, so you might have some really good ideas of quite a practical nature. So you see a problem. You see that something needs to be done, and the Sun-Mercury conjunction, which is on the 27th, August 27th, may provide a solution. But there's another way of looking at it. It's just possible that you don't give people a chance. Because Mercury might be overwhelmed. So Mercury could be information. It might be an alternative view, something you should be listening to, a series of or a set of good ideas. But you might just decide you don't want to be bothered with it, and you could shut down alternatives. And so with that Sun-Mercury conjunction, it does give you a certain amount of responsibility. It gives you the responsibility to listen to yourself. And if you have any new insights, take them seriously. But perhaps more importantly, listen to what you're being told. Listen to the information coming from the outside world. You might disagree with it, but that doesn't mean that you should discard it. Virgo. August, in some respects, is a month of two parts. You might say that the first part of the month, even the first 2/3 of August, has an emphasis on Virgo, especially if you look at this an emphasis on Leo, especially if you look at it from a perspective, of the Sun. So, the Sun is moving through Leo until, the 22nd and the 23rd, and then you get the sign change. And the Sun moves into your sign, and you could say, that is the Virgo season. That's when you really sort of come into your own. In fact, the month starts with Venus in Virgo, so you get a little touch of the Virgo season, but then on the 6th, Venus moves out of Virgo and moves into Libra, and so there is that change, and it is perhaps a little confusing. So you may be this month not quite sure about when you should make your move. You kind of feel at the beginning of a month you'd like to get things done, you'd like to make a start, but then circumstances might make you change your mind, and you might then feel that it is just best perhaps not to do very much. And maybe that's okay, at least in terms of your social persona. Maybe giving the impression that you are not interested, or you just want to disengage. And meanwhile, in your own private world, you can largely do what you like, and perhaps it's a good time for preparation. As planets perhaps get ready to move into Virgo, and you've already perhaps done some preparation while Venus was in Virgo, but it moves into Libra, and so there is that change. And Mercury has been in Cancer for a long time. And then we find that on the 9th, it moves into Leo. And it stays in Leo for a couple of weeks until I think it's I think it's the 25th that Venus that Mercury moves into Virgo. So while Mercury is moving through Leo, it just may be that there's just not very much you want to do, at least not in a public sense, and you might then find that you're perhaps feeling a bit sort of shy and reserved. But don't do nothing, because when Mercury moves into Leo, it starts moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter. So on the 14th of August, we have a Mercury-Jupiter conjunction. And this Mercury-Jupiter conjunction really is pretty fortunate. I mean, Jupiter is a lucky planet. And the question then is, where is your luck? And your luck might not be, out there, in the world. It might be sort of right where you want to be. It might be right in front of you. There's no need to chase your luck, to think that you have to go to the the other side of the world to find what you're looking for. You don't, and it might be that it is right in front of you. It might be hidden, but hidden somewhere, really sort of close by. Okay, that gives the impression that your luck is a kind of a physical object. I mean, it's not, but it could be. You might find something you've been looking for of value, and you've been looking for it for years, and then perhaps with the Mercury-Jupiter conjunction will enable you to find it in some hidden place. But it could, also be about the way your unconscious mind is working, and your unconscious mind is working away behind the scenes, and it's coming to some valuable conclusions. Now, this Mercury-Jupiter conjunction is important in another way, because Mercury is ruler of Virgo, of course, and Jupiter is ruler of Pisces, which is your opposite sign. So in terms of sort of classic 12-sign astrology, Mercury-Jupiter conjunctions, are often seen as being, very fortunate for relationships. They allow you to, get close to someone. If you're looking for a new relationship, then, Mercury-Jupiter conjunction, might be, just what you're looking for, because, you can literally personify Mercury and Jupiter. Mercury is you, Jupiter is the other person. Mercury-Jupiter conjunction, you and someone else have that meeting, you have that connection. So from a very sort of optimistic viewpoint, that's how one can see it. I mean, one has to be careful here, because when it comes to relationships, there's just plenty of scope for sort of fantasy and wishful thinking and disappointment, and that is a problem with astrology and love. But I still think that with Mercury and Jupiter, conjunction, you perhaps can benefit from connections with another person, and these connections might be quite low profile. It might be quite secretive. I mean, you could see it as a secret meeting. I mean, a secret meeting for whatever reason. It might not be about romance. It could be about business or something else. And so, meeting someone, getting to know someone, and just being careful that the rest of the world, don't find out about, what's going on. Now, the Virgo side of things, I mean, it really does, take off, at the end of a month. By the 23rd, you've got the Sun moving into Virgo. Then the 25th, you've got Mercury moving into Virgo, and it's at that stage that you start to feel that you have arrived, that you're able to think straight, that you no longer have to be so secretive. You can afford to be more open and honest. And we have a full moon eclipse on the 28th. So this is a partial eclipse, so it's potentially quite something quite strong. And this eclipse takes place at 4 degrees 54 Pisces, so it takes place in your opposite sign. And this eclipse, it's across the main axis of your chart. So you've got Sun in Virgo, Mercury in Sun in Virgo, Moon in Pisces. And when you're dealing with a full moon, there can be a sense of realization. You understand something for the first time, and it could be about the nature of a relationship. So if you've been in a relationship with someone, this full moon might bring something home. You could understand the truth about someone, for better or for worse. And perhaps you're helped, with this Pisces full moon, that your emotions start working for you. Your feelings are giving you the information you need to make a decision. And also around the time of this full moon, in fact, just before the full moon, we have a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. And this Sun-Mercury conjunction, it takes place in Virgo, and it does mean that Mercury is combust. And so when you've got this kind of conjunction, combustion talks about being burnt up, and it just might be that something is overwhelming, and you may not entirely be able to think straight. Now, you should be able to think straight with this full moon because the truth is available, but just before the full moon, the fact that you've got the Mercury being combust is there may be things that you just don't want to hear. Or it could be that on a psychological level, you feel that you want to look away. You want to ignore certain facts because they feel uncomfortable. And additionally, it is possible that you might just be a little too secretive for your own good. I think you're becoming much less secretive at the end of the month, but there may be something that you've been thinking about that you should be discussing, and you're not discussing it. And because you're not discussing it, you're not getting an alternative view. And I think you need an alternative view. And so, overall, while I think the last part of last week or so of August, does look good because of its Virgo emphasis, I think you've got to be very open-minded, and you've got to really show, a great deal of honesty. And additionally, if something happens that you weren't expecting, as it could. Mercury is making a square to Uranus. In fact, on the same day as the full moon, I think. So Mercury square Uranus just might be something happening that you hadn't fully understood, and it might seem at first sight a little bit upsetting or worrying, but you shouldn't see it like that, because you've got Mercury's in Virgo, you've got Uranus in Gemini, and Uranus in Gemini, don't forget Uranus is in Gemini. Uranus is about you, it's about your ambitions, it's about you having a clear idea about what makes you special and unique in terms of your ambitions for the future. And so Mercury square Uranus could actually be an incredibly useful aspect. Okay, it might to begin with be disturbing. It might be something you don't really want to have to deal with, but maybe what you're having to deal with is your own uniqueness and the realization that you have a unique contribution, and perhaps that you need to stand out. It's not enough just to keep things to yourself. You have to cause a stir. And that's something that the average Virgo doesn't necessarily want to do. But, there's a time for everything. And so you shouldn't be afraid of publicity, and you shouldn't worry too much about getting an adverse reaction. Libra. We start August with quite an interesting and sort of maybe novel situation. I mean, it's novel in the sense that you perhaps haven't experienced it for some time, if at all, and that is, having Jupiter in Leo. That's where it is. That's where Jupiter is at the start of the month, and having also the North Node in Aquarius. So, Leo and Aquarius are two signs which are opposite one another. So there's a kind of a differing emphasis there. And, with Jupiter in Leo, and also the Sun is in Leo as well, Libra, this can be a time when you can be very sociable. You can enjoy the company of your friends, and being a Libra, you really do understand that you are a social animal. If you are alone, then it might just feel that something is wrong, that something is missing. And while it's good to be sociable, you can take things too far, especially as we have at the beginning of the month, a conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter. Okay, but the Sun-Jupiter conjunction was exact. In fact, at the end of July. But I mean, really, the very end of July. But still, the Sun and Jupiter are quite close, and just could mean that you take things too far. You perhaps put too much emphasis on being accepted and doing the right things and going to the right places. And, you do have to think about yourself. And this is where the North Node comes in. So the true North Node starts the month, at the end of Aquarius. This is slightly different with the mean node. I think the mean node starts a month, right at the beginning of Pisces. But I mean, the mean node does eventually go into Aquarius. But Aquarius is a sign that is important to you. It's a sign that represents the things you can do, the things you can do well, and it also is indicative of your unique destiny, a destiny that is really not connected with other people. Other people can have their opinions, but you've nonetheless got to really think for yourself. And this might be the challenge of this Leo-Aquarius dichotomy. So yeah, by all means fit in to some extent, but what is important to you? And of course Pluto is in Aquarius, so having a Pluto and a North Node in Aquarius, you need to really believe in yourself and recognize that in the final analysis, you are the one who is right. If there is an argument and you're being told to do something, then in the end it is your decision. Now, at the beginning of the month, Venus is in Virgo. That's where it is. Venus is your ruler, and Venus in Virgo is not entirely comfortable for you. I mean, Virgo is a sign that doesn't have a great deal to do with Libra. Okay, Libra and Virgo are joining on to one another, but with Venus in Virgo, you might not entirely be yourself. Maybe you find yourself sort of thinking about things too hard, over-analyzing. You find yourself having to worry about money and financial details in a way that doesn't sound good. And you might also find yourself making calculations, making calculations about, for example, the benefit of a particular person in your life. Is this person a net benefit? Is it worth having them around? We all make these calculations. It's certainly nothing to feel guilty about, but it might be happening sort of more than usual for you, at the beginning of August. Now, fortunately, Venus does change sign. On the 6th of a month, Venus moves into Libra, and it stays in Libra for the rest of August. And I think that that is great. I mean, Venus rules Libra. It's your sign. And with Venus moving through Libra, you can really be yourself. And you can just feel comfortable in your own skin, and that means that you can be warm and friendly and sociable, and at the same time be able to completely look after your own interests. So yeah, you can get your priorities right, and it shouldn't be too much of an effort. You'll get the balance right. I mean, after all, Venus and Libra, it is about the balance. And then as Venus moves through the first degrees of Libra, something interesting starts to happen. It starts to make a trine to Pluto and a trine to Uranus. And in fact, on the 10th of August, Venus trines Pluto, and then on the 11th of August, it trines Uranus. So we have a grand trine, and this grand trine involving these outer planets is it's quite exciting, and it can be quite sort of inspirational. I mean, you think about what Uranus and Pluto are all about. Uranus and Pluto are about the quest for freedom. You want to do things differently. You want to perhaps overthrow the existing order. Okay, I'm not saying you have to be a revolutionary, but it might be that you feel a bit constrained by ongoing events. You're kind of thinking you're having to do the same old thing in the same old way. And Uranus and Pluto together, is about the new. It's about accepting that the future has arrived and making it your future. So you're not going to be a victim of a future, or rather, there's no need for you to be a victim of a future. It can be a future that you construct, and I therefore think that this grand trine really can be helpful, and it can allow you to define what is important to you, and in your own way you can be a disruptor. I mean, you're not disrupting for the sake of it. It's just that you want to be yourself, and this is completely in accord with what I was saying about the North Node, being in Aquarius. And so I think that this can be exciting, and certainly for those few days you can be very powerful. Now, Venus is also making an opposition to Neptune, and this Venus-Neptune opposition, I mean, it can be interesting. I mean, Neptune is a planet which can be very very spiritual, and it might give you a sense that there is something else out there. In fact, Uranus and Pluto are sort of external energies. They represent the cosmos, and so Neptune is just perhaps another planet that you're able to pick up on. But there's some danger that you get a bit confused with Venus opposition Neptune. And I think with Venus opposition Neptune, you have to be very careful with relationships around the sort of the 10th. So if you're involved in a close relationship, or you want to be in a relationship, or you have fantasies about another person, then it might not be great, and you might make mistakes. So I think that ideally, if you want to make the most of this grand trine, you should be at some distance from other people. Yeah, relationships might be attractive. You might have ideas about the perfect partnership, but with Venus opposition Neptune, there's just some danger that you make a mistake, or you convince yourself that something is possible when in fact it could be just plain fantasy. But Venus does move on. And following from that grand trine, it moves towards a sextile of Jupiter. Now, Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics. Jupiter the greater benefic, Venus the lesser benefic. And with Venus in Libra sextiling Jupiter in Leo, I think that aspect is just lucky. I mean, that is one way of looking at it, just plain luck. It's a time when things can work for you. And yes, you can be lucky in your choice of friends, but maybe not in terms of your choice of, really sort of close relationships. So perhaps focus more on the social side of things rather than the interpersonal side. And, additionally with Venus sextile Jupiter, ask yourself, what exactly do you want? What are you looking for? It's not just about money or status. It's something more important than that. And with Venus sextile Jupiter, you might get real evidence that you're on the right track, that you are creating your own future. So really, that does look good. But it's important that you're not complacent. You mustn't just think, oh, everything is fine, everything might be fine, you can just, go with the flow. You've got to make some effort to create some structure and be realistic. And this does become clear as you move towards the 21st of September, 31st of August, 21st of August, because Venus is starting to move towards an opposition of Saturn. And so if you think about it, Venus in Libra, opposition Saturn in Aries, this Venus-Saturn opposition is taking place across the main horizontal of your chart. And this could be about relationships. And, this kind of supports my idea that maybe relationships should be avoided, because unfortunately, a classic way of describing Venus opposition Saturn is disappointment in relationships. So this would be particularly the case if you're maybe in a new relationship or you're trying to get into a relationship with Venus opposition Saturn. It just could really be disappointing, and you might sort of come down to earth, with a thud. And so, I'd like to be more positive, but we've got to be realistic. Or it could be another person represented by Saturn who just holds you up. And so be very careful around the 21st, in the lead up to the 21st, about trusting people. Particularly if it's something important. Someone says they're going to do something for you, they say they're going to be there, they say they're going to help you, and then you see the reality of the situation. And so maybe the message here with Venus opposition Saturn is to be, as really, independent as possible. It does indeed sort of pay to be able to sort of, look after yourself and make sure that you don't put yourself in a situation where you are over reliant. But once that Venus Saturn opposition becomes exact, it kind of loses its power, because what happens after that? Venus Saturn opposition, Venus, it separates from Saturn, and things do start to calm down, and you get a sort of a degree of stability as you move towards the end of the month. Now, one thing I haven't talked about, which may be relevant to your career, or just your ambitions, or your concepts of status, and the way, perhaps in a material sense, you want to move forward with. You do want to move forward, I assume, in terms of whatever you're doing. It's the fact that Mars does enter Cancer at some stage in the month. Specifically, I think it's on the 11th that Mars enters Cancer. Now, Mars entering Cancer, does matter. And, the reason it matters is because Cancer is a cardinal sign. And in the Libran chart, Cancer is actually a very important sign. Cancer can represent your career. It can represent the way you are developing your ego. And so with Mars moving into Cancer, that does give you an ambition. It gives you real energy to be able to sort of move forward with those ambitions, whatever they might be. However, you have to be careful. Mars can be a difficult influence, and it might be, in terms of your work, if you have a job, if you have a career, that you can start to see the problems. You can start to see where the resistance is. I've just already mentioned Venus being opposition Saturn, and that Venus opposition Saturn could actually relate to someone holding you up in terms of your business or your work or some other ambition you have. But Mars in Cancer, it could be someone in authority who just takes themselves too seriously. Someone who is angry. That's what Mars in Cancer can represent. Someone angry. Someone who's got a chip on their shoulder. And so that kind of person should be avoided from the 11th onwards. And right at the end of the month, in fact, on September the 1st, there is an exact square between Mars and Saturn. So you've got Mars in Cancer square Saturn in Aries, and this could be about someone trying to make your life miserable, someone who really thinks they're special, who might have a chip on their shoulder, and so there could be real resistance here. And really, this goes back to what I was saying, right at the beginning of this piece on Libra. You can be sociable, by all means, but in a sort of a gentle way. You can have friends, you can talk to your friends, you can be happy with your friends, but fundamentally there is a value in being independent. You don't want to be in a situation where another person's decisions or another person's moods could potentially spoil everything. I mean, it could happen, Libra. It really could, with this sort of Mars-Saturn square, with Venus opposition Saturn, these aspects over the course of a month. But on the plus side, if you put yourself in a position where you are always in control, where you are always in a position where you make the decisions, then these aspects, particularly that Venus opposition Saturn and Mars square Saturn, is not going to have much of an impact. It'll maybe sort of be sort of water off a duck's back, and I think that is the way to take control of the month. And don't forget that the North Node is now in Aquarius, and that is really asking you to be an individual and to see everything in terms of yourself rather than in terms of other people. Scorpio, your ambitions do matter. I mean, that's the first thing to say. If there's something you want to do, then in August, make sure you give yourself the best possible chance of achieving it. And, I'm saying this because, Jupiter is now in Leo. Okay, Jupiter went into Leo, some time ago, quite a few weeks ago. So yeah, that's how the month starts. But additionally, the Sun is moving into Leo. In fact, the Sun is in Leo. So it's more than that. So by the first of August, you've got both the Sun and Jupiter in Leo, and the Sun and Jupiter are making a conjunction to one another, and so this really does put the focus on your ambitions. Now, the Sun is always in Leo at the beginning of August, so maybe Scorpio August is a time when you are thinking about your ambitions and what it is that you're trying to get off the ground. But this time round, this August, Jupiter is in Leo as well, and of course Jupiter stays in Leo until next year. I think July of 2027, it moves out of Leo and moves into Virgo. So this does put a lot of emphasis on what it is that you want to achieve, and so I would recommend, Scorpio, that you have a busy August. I don't know what your plans are for August. It would kind of be a shame if you were taking August off, or if you were just putting your ambitions on hold. I mean, I know it's the summer and people are not supposed to do anything, particularly in the northern hemisphere. But I think that you need to think about what it is that you want to achieve, and I think it is okay to be ambitious. Okay, other people might not care, but if you're able to just keep focusing on what is important, then I think that you can make good progress. Now, don't go too far. You do have to think about other people, particularly your family, and so this is especially the case if you are an ambitious Scorpio, and if you can really relate to the idea of having a busy August. Perhaps an obsessively busy August. If you're that kind of Scorpio, then bear in mind that the true node has entered Aquarius. So Aquarius is the opposite sign to Leo, and so the true node is about your direction. It's kind of where you should be heading, and so with a north node moving into Aquarius over the next year or two, next couple of years, do think about what is fundamentally important. Yeah, that includes your home and your family and so forth. And so you certainly don't want to be pushing your ambitions so far that you completely disrupt your own security and other people's security. So, everything in moderation. I mean, I do understand that some Scorpios are extremists. Scorpio is a fixed sign, and you can take things too far. But I think it's okay to put the emphasis on your ambitions, over the course of this month. Now, at the beginning of the month, Mars is in Gemini. Of course, Mars is your ruler, and so if we want to know what's going on in the Scorpio world, we have to take a close look at what Mars is doing. And Mars is in late Gemini, and it is getting ready to change signs. And Mars does change signs on I think it's the August the 11th. So that sign change does matter. Perhaps the whole way you present yourself is going to change, because Mars in Gemini, it's not been entirely easy. It's been a time when there's perhaps been things bothering you. There have been things to think about, things to worry about, things to analyze, and you weren't feeling entirely sure that you were doing the right thing, and you were kind of torn between two approaches. After all, Gemini, two-bodied sign. Are you, for example, are you analytical, or are you rational, or do you just trust your feelings? It was just difficult to know. But with Mars moving into Cancer, I think that is a fortunate sign change. Now, Mars in Cancer, okay, you could say that Mars is fallen in Cancer, but, because it's exalted in Capricorn, so maybe you might think that Mars isn't great in Cancer. But, Cancer is a water sign. And additionally, Mars rules the water signs, all of the water signs. So in fact, Mars, your ruler, has dignity in Cancer, and so for the rest of August, you're in a sign where you are dignified, even though you're fallen. I mean, okay, it's a choice, and that is perhaps a problem with astrology. How can you be fallen and dignified at the same time? Well, maybe you can make that choice. I think with Mars moving into Cancer, okay, if there is a danger of Mars moving into Cancer. It can make you a little bit sort of broody. That's a standard interpretation of Mars in Cancer, just being perhaps inappropriately emotional at the wrong time. But I think you're aware of this. This is an energy that you're familiar with, and if you look at the positive side of Mars in Cancer, there is a sense of familiarity, and even familiarity with the unknown. And perhaps that's part of the difference between Mars in Gemini and Mars in Cancer. While Mars was moving through Gemini, you kind of felt that things were changing, but you really didn't know how they were changing, and you were unsure about how things were going to develop. But now that Mars is in Cancer, it might just feel that you've arrived and that you're just better able to deal with things which are sort of new and unusual and unfamiliar. And I think that overall you're going to just be feeling a lot better about yourself. And around this time, a couple of days after Mars moves into Cancer on the 12th of August, we have a total eclipse, new moon total eclipse in Leo. Now, this total eclipse could be actually quite a big deal. I mean, total eclipses are a big deal, and total eclipses, they can have a bad reputation. I mean, eclipse. Everything is eclipse. Everything is blotted out. But, this eclipse, it is in Leo. It's in a high-profile part of your chart. It's like what I was saying with Jupiter in Leo and the Sun in Leo. It is a time when it's okay to be ambitious up to a point. And this eclipse in Leo really does allow you to focus on what is important to you. So it might well be, as you go into August, and maybe you hear me talking about your ambitions and what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve, it might not mean much. But I think with the total eclipse, things will start to make sense, and it is a new lunar cycle. So the old lunar cycle comes to an end with this eclipse, and you then sort of experience a new beginning, and you start to realize, what is possible and what it is that you can achieve. And I think that you will sort of recognize that, in fact, you can achieve, a great deal, and at the same time, you can keep everyone happy. So it might well be that the eclipse, it will potentially dominate, the last half of August, and so that's maybe something to look forward to. But if you are going to start something new on this eclipse, it might be the case that something else has to be given up. Something that might have been holding you back, and you just have to, say goodbye to it, and that might be something to think about. Now, as Mars moves through Cancer in particularly in the last half of August, it does move towards a square of Saturn, and I think that on September the 1st there is an exact Mars square Saturn, but you're going to be feeling this Mars square Saturn certainly by the last week of August, and probably before. And on the face of it, a Mars square Saturn is a problem. I mean, Mars square Saturn can be seen as one of the worst aspects in the book. Mars is frustrated by Saturn. You feel that something is holding you back. You have all these things you want to do, achieve and explore, but something you have to deal with. And it's important that you don't run away from it. And Saturn could represent your limitations. You cannot do everything. You haven't got the time. There are only 24 hours in a day, and you've got to sleep. And plus, you've got to think about your own body. Physically, there are always going to be limits, and I think that this Mars square Saturn is reminding you of the limits, and it's also reminding you that if you want to get things done, you have to have some discipline, and you have to be able to prioritize. You cannot be in lots of different places at once. You cannot be all things to all people. And so with this Mars square Saturn, tell yourself what is important, and exclude everything else, or you can deprioritize it, you can do it later. And so once you've decided what is important, and maybe you can actually decide what is important at the time of that full moon eclipse, once you make that decision, then I think that you'll be in a better position to really end the month in a way that that feels good, that feels that you are getting something done, and that you have the discipline to be successful. Sagittarius. August starts with both the Sun and Jupiter in Leo. And, I think that, this is certainly a strong start to the month. Having, Jupiter in Leo. Jupiter, is, of course, your ruler. And, in Leo, it's a sign where Jupiter is pretty happy. And Sagittarians can look at things in a new way. When you think about Sagittarius is the archer. The arrow is always trying to go further. It's trying to expand its area of operations, and at the same time wanting to find something new and exciting, and not be sort of stuck in the same place doing the same things. And so with Jupiter in Leo, you're hopefully enjoying the new possibilities that are starting to emerge. And additionally, it's a time, Sagittarius, to be rethinking some of your fundamental beliefs. Being a Sagittarius, you can sometimes be quite skeptical, and you can be quite mocking. You can laugh at other people's ideas and beliefs, but you yourself can be quite firm in what matters in your own principles. And this perhaps is really emphasized with Jupiter moving into Leo. Yet, this conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter, which really the month starts with, could be a little bit overwhelming. Maybe there are things that you believe in too strongly, and you might find that you are sort of ironically limiting yourself. So this is supposed to be a time, for expanding your horizons, and for just seeing all the things that are available, all the ideas that are available. Yet, because the Jupiter is combust, because the Sun is making that conjunction to Jupiter, and the Sun is not always a fortunate influence. It can just be too much of a good thing, and you have one particular idea, and you decide to give it everything. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend that course of action, because this should be a time when you are genuinely open to new possibilities. And overall, I really do think that it should be a pretty good month. In August, you can stabilize yourself, and you can stabilize your ideas, and it's not just like you're sort of going off on a cloud. You're able to sort of bring it all down to earth, and be able to really enjoy everything that is possible. And the influence of this Sun-Jupiter conjunction does start to wane as August progresses. In fact, right at the beginning of the month, the Sun has actually gone beyond Jupiter, but it's still quite close. So that's certainly something that you need to be thinking about. Another thing I should point out is that Jupiter is moving towards a trine of Saturn, and arguably, this is the main event of the month. And by the end of a month, that trine between Jupiter and Saturn, is exact. Now, when we hear the word Saturn, we might be thinking in terms of a limitation, all the things that could be holding you back, things that you might be wary of, and maybe Saturn could be authority figures, people telling you what to do, and so on. But it's not. I don't think in this case. It's about creating structure. Sagittarius is a sign that can be sort of buzzing all over the place, lots of directions to go in, and you have to kind of bring it all together without being doctrinaire, without being ideological, without getting off on your sort of moral high horse. That's certainly not something you want to do, as I've suggested. Now, as the Sun and Jupiter move towards the trine, really they're making a grand trine with your sign. So we've got Saturn in Aries, Jupiter in Leo, and then there's Sagittarius to complete things. So August, it really is a month of being able to get it together, and I think that you really can get it together in quite a big way. So I think there's certainly a lot of scope for optimism. And then we have on the 12th, I think it is, we've got an eclipse. And this is a total eclipse of the sun. It's a new moon eclipse, and it is in Leo. And so this eclipse for you might represent something of a new beginning. And you can sort of understand things in a new way, and you might actually like to move in a different direction. And different Sagittarians are going to approach this eclipse in different ways. I mean, one way of looking at this eclipse is to be thinking about where your center is. Where is your center of operations? Where do you live? Where would you like to live? Would you like to live somewhere else? And with the new moon, it might occur to you that things could be better. They could be better, maybe somewhere else. And this kind of ties in with the fact that very recently there has been an opposition between Jupiter and Pluto, and Jupiter, being your ruler, has been really hit by Pluto. And I think Pluto's influence has been quite positive, but Pluto has been telling you that things could be better. You cannot be satisfied with things as they are. You should always be looking for an improvement. And this quest for an improvement could be quite obsessive, but sometimes that's how improvement has to happen. And when you have this eclipse just after the Jupiter-Pluto opposition, it might occur to you that one way of creating a big change, could be to move, maybe even to move to another country, or you start to think about the possibility of movement. But sometimes to create the big change, you don't have to move. You can perhaps stay exactly where you are, and this new moon might instead bring in a spiritual or a philosophical change. I mean, even a political change. So when you look at your own ideas, it's certainly tempting to be stubborn and to really hold on to what you believe in, and that might be how you felt at the beginning of August. But with the new moon eclipse, it just might occur to you that some things have had their day, and maybe it's time to change your fundamental view of the world. Okay, you don't have to completely abandon everything, but when you look at what's going on, you realize that there's more out there. And another way in which this new moon might manifest is that you decide that you need to know more, and that might suggest a course of study. in an extreme situation, that might mean that you suddenly decide you want to go back to college or go back to university, but it doesn't have to go that far. It just may be that you start to see a gap in your knowledge, and you're thinking about, how can you complete that? How can you fill that gap? And it just maybe there's some course you can do. It could be an internet course. It doesn't necessarily have to cost you any money. I mean, the internet does provide so many opportunities. I mean, it's a strange thing, isn't it? I mean, people complain that the internet brings a load of ignorance and people know less and less. But the reality is that with the internet, you can learn anything. And so if it's something you decide you want to learn about, and I'm not just talking about trivial knowledge, just a few facts. I'm talking about a higher learning about something in depth, and so that might be something that you want to work with. Although it could be learning of a spiritual nature, learning about a particular religion or a faith or a spiritual system. So that is certainly a very positive way in which this new moon eclipse could work. And of course, it also feeds into the fact that Jupiter is now in Leo, and as you move on beyond that eclipse, we have on the 17th. We have Jupiter sextile Venus. Now, in terms of my approach to astrology, I am absolutely aware that many people looking at astrology videos, that things like love and relationships is an important concern. I mean, it depends on people's situations, but that's certainly something I have been sort of aware of. But as far as I'm concerned, love, relationships, and astrology is quite potentially a bad mix. Because, when people mix astrology and love, and they think that astrology is going to fix their problems and is going to somehow help their love life, I'm absolutely not convinced. And in fact, astrology can make things worse by creating false hope. And it's definitely the case that it can. So I have to be careful here. But with Jupiter sextile Venus, Jupiter is your ruler. Venus is a planet of love. And so it could be that Jupiter sextile Venus might herald a new relationship, a relationship that it might come from nowhere, or it could be the development of an existing relationship. But, it doesn't have to be romantic. It could just be a connection with someone. It could be, for example, a connection with a friend, someone who you hadn't been too close to before. But Jupiter sextile Venus allows you to really find a rapport with someone, and perhaps a lot of it is connected with shared beliefs. I mean, believing in the same things as another person can be important. Spiritual beliefs, political beliefs, it does matter. We are living in polarized times, and very often if people have differing political beliefs, they fall out with each other. It's that serious, and it's not just in the United States. So with that Jupiter sextile Venus, be aware of it, and just be open to the possibility of someone new coming into your life, but don't feel that you have to. Don't feel that you can just wait around for something to happen. You have to be proactive, and it is just astrology, and I certainly don't want to. I don't want to create false hope. Now, towards the end of the month, the Leo emphasis starts to change. And we get planets moving into Virgo. The Sun moves into Virgo, the 22nd, 23rd. Then we've got Mercury moving into Virgo, and in fact, the Sun and Mercury make a conjunction in Virgo. I mean, I think that's on the 27th, and this Virgo emphasis, or this growing Virgo emphasis, perhaps works for you. And Virgo is an earth sign, and it provides a degree of balance. It reminds you that there are things you want to do, there are things you want to achieve. In the Northern Hemisphere, end of August, or summer's nearly over. There are perhaps important things to think about, perhaps relating to career, success, your ambitions. Perhaps ambitions have been put on hold, and with the Sun and Mercury in Virgo, it's a time for you to realign, to focus on what is important to you. And if once the Sun goes into Virgo, you start putting your energy into a particular direction, an ambition, or perhaps just into your work, if that's appropriate, then I think that you'll make a solid progress. It won't necessarily be spectacular progress, but you are definitely in a frame of mind where you actually understand what needs to be done. Indeed, you understand the important details. And as these planets move into Virgo, Sun and Mercury move into Virgo, we have a full moon eclipse. We have, it's a partial eclipse, and it's an eclipse in Pisces. And so, this eclipse, Sagittarius, is hitting an important horizontal in your chart. It's in the jargon. You've got Sun and Mercury in the 10th house, and you've got Pluto. You've got the Moon in Pisces, and the Pisces is the 4th house. And in astrology, the 4th house is connected with the home and the family, and whereas the 10th house is about work, career, ambitions. And so this full moon eclipse might make you think about the balance between your need for security and for roots, and having a home and a family around you, and keeping everyone happy, keeping yourself happy. But on the other hand, you've got to make progress, and you've got to get that balance right. And you might have a certain inclination to, at the end of the month, to perhaps focus too much on the details, on things perhaps of an overly material nature, and certain things could be forgotten. Important things like who you are, where your loyalties lie, and just making sure that everything is in order, everyone is feeling secure. Now, I'm absolutely not saying you should abandon your ambitions, far from it, but ambitions and your concepts of the future do to an extent rely on the past, and the past and the future do need to be balanced. And I think with this full moon eclipse, partial eclipse, I think that you perhaps start to understand what it's all about, and what your priorities are, and where you want to put your energy. Capricorn. So August starts with planets in Leo. You've got Jupiter in Leo, and Jupiter in Leo is perhaps something, Capricorn, you're still getting used to. And the challenge here might be to deal with things which might be, ever so slightly complicated, especially as the Sun is in Leo as well. So, the month, in fact, starts off with a Sun-Jupiter conjunction. And, this Sun-Jupiter conjunction, it sounds good, doesn't it? Sun, the heart of everything, Jupiter, the planet of good luck, and they're together. But it's possible that it just might be just too much for you, and certain things, Capricorn, just might seem, rather too intense, and you're kind of wary of taking things too far. But this Sun-Jupiter conjunction is not going to last for very long. In fact, the Sun and Jupiter were exactly conjunct, right at the end of July. So the Sun and Jupiter are separating from one another. And I think that during the first week of the month, you're going to find that things do start to get easier. And also, it's important to have a certain sense of discipline and proportion, because one aspect we do have right at the beginning of the month, I think it's on the 1st of August, is a trine between the Sun and Saturn. So that trine gives you the possibility of seeing things in some perspective. And Sun Saturn trine means that you can take something that is difficult and perhaps bring it down to earth. And just because it appears to be complicated doesn't necessarily mean that it has to remain complicated. So don't panic. If the beginning of a month seems a bit difficult, or you even feel that you might be in alien territory, and then on it's a 6. I think it's a 6. The 6th of August, we have Venus moving into Libra. Now, Venus moving into Libra is an important event. And it's an important event for you, Capricorn, because Venus is moving into a sign which is right at the top of your chart. And the sign Libra in the Capricorn horoscope is about success and putting your stamp on society. And with Venus moving into Libra, you feel better, and you feel better able to relate your ambitions, whatever those ambitions might be, to the world around you. And this might also say something about the way you present yourself. Venus moving into Libra, I like to see it as the looking in the mirror aspect. You do see yourself in the mirror. I mean, I'm not saying you are literally looking at yourself in the mirror, but you might become aware more so than usual about what you look like and what kind of impression you're having on other people. And I mean all this in a completely positive sense. With Venus in Libra, you really can present yourself well, and Venus stays in Libra, throughout the month, and so that is useful. And you're not just presenting yourself well, just for the sake of it. Hopefully, you're presenting yourself well because it would be useful. It's necessary in order to make the right impression, so that you can get your way. And Venus, as it moves through Libra, makes a trine to Pluto, and it also makes a trine to Saturn. So we've got a grand trine in air signs. And with this grand trine in air signs, I think, Capricorn, that you really have an impact. You stand out without necessarily having to do very much. It's almost like you're connected with everything around you, and Uranus and Pluto are these quite sort of cosmic energies, and you're able to bring this together. And this might also say something about your approach to your ambitions, to your career. If you have a business, perhaps of that, and you can perhaps be quite sort of new and original. And Capricorn has a certain reputation for being quite a traditional sign, liking to do things in the same way, not wanting too much variety, being afraid of things which you've never heard of before. But don't limit yourself with this grand trine. It's something that you really can make the most of. And furthermore, Venus in Libra goes on to make a sextile to Jupiter, and Venus sextile Jupiter, it's a great aspect. These two planets, which the most fortunate planets in the solar system, and they come together, and this allows you to take something which not so long ago you thought was dangerous, and you can turn it into something of real value. And perhaps you realize that you know more than other people. You have insights that other people just don't have, because you're not just open-minded, but in fact because you're not afraid. You can take things to their logical conclusion, and so perhaps you're prepared to go in areas that perhaps other people aren't. And while this is happening, Jupiter is making a trine to Saturn. So this is happening throughout the month. Jupiter moving through Leo, making a trine to Saturn in Aries. And of course, Saturn is your ruler. And this Jupiter-Saturn trine is very much connected with society, with the business cycle. And as individuals, one is really trying to understand what is going on, because a lot of us are scared. There are some scary things going on in the economy, in the world, wars, conflict, tariffs, whatever. And this Jupiter-Saturn trine allows you to make sense of it all. And once you start making sense of it all, you can perhaps start to make a plan. You can perhaps not just protect yourself, but maybe even take advantage of the situation. And then at the end of the month, we have planets moving into Virgo. Okay, Jupiter's not going to go into Virgo. Jupiter doesn't go into Virgo until July of next year, but by the end of the month we've got the Sun and Mercury moving into Virgo, and with the Sun and Mercury moving into Virgo, things feel even better, and you perhaps really do start to relax, and you see what needs to be seen, and then you realize that what you thought was complicated, even dangerous, is actually very straightforward. And this means that you really are in a good position at the end of a month. Though I should make one point about the end of a month, is that right at the end of a month there is a square between Mars and Saturn. I mean, in fact, the Mars-Saturn square is on September the 1st, so okay, it's not technically exact, but it's going to be perhaps a feature of the last few days. You start to feel it. So you've got Mars in a Cancer in your opposite sign, making a square to Saturn, which is your ruler. And although I think that the end of the month does end on a good note with these planets in Virgo, Mars just could represent a spoiling factor. Something happens or could happen which is disruptive, and it could well be another person. Perhaps there is a particular relationship that really messes you up. I'm not necessarily saying that it's an important relationship, like a marriage. It just might be just someone and you kind of know this person is bad news. This person could cause trouble. But, if you let them cause trouble, then that could be very frustrating. So at the end of the month, be very careful in terms of your choices of personnel, who you want to spend your time with, who you want to rely on, who you want to trust. But it's not inevitable, and if you look after yourself and you think about the future and you don't allow any one person to have too much influence, then I think you'll be okay. Aquarius, Jupiter is now in your opposite sign, which is Leo, and the Sun is there as well. And as you might know, Jupiter is a relatively slow-moving planet, and it will stay in Leo until July of next year. So what is this all about? Well, I think if one tries to be sort of straightforward and sticks to the symbolism, one could say that, with Jupiter in Leo, it might be a time when relationships could be more important than usual, and you have to think about the other, whoever that other might be. Now, as far as August is concerned, the month starts not just with Jupiter in Leo, it sees the Sun there as well. In fact, there is a Sun-Jupiter conjunction right at the beginning of the month, and this really does place a great deal of emphasis on the other. So if you're a typical Aquarius, you might enjoy your independence. You might feel that maybe you can do things, on your own, that you don't have to get other people's permission and approval. That might all be true, but things might be even better if you got some cooperation. And this isn't just about August. It is about this whole period in which Jupiter is moving through your opposite sign, right through for the next year until July of 2027. And, at times it might get to be, a bit too much. Every year, of course, in August, for most of August, the Sun is moving through Leo, and, the Sun rules Leo. And so, the Sun is very strong in Leo, and the Sun might represent another person, a person that really can't be ignored. Perhaps this person, wants attention, and, you might not necessarily want to give it to them, but, you might not have a choice. Additionally, there is a psychological dimension to this, Aquarius. If you get annoyed that another person is wanting attention, especially at the beginning of August, maybe you're kind of projecting. Maybe deep down, Aquarius, it's you who are looking for attention. You want to be recognized. And, if that is the way you feel, then fair enough. There's nothing to be ashamed about. We all have egos. We all want to be appreciated. And, also at the start of the month is a trine between the Sun and Saturn. So, the Sun in Leo, is trine Saturn in Aries. Now, that is relevant to you because Saturn is your ruling planet. I mean, I know that some of you might think that Aquarius is the ruler of. Some of you might feel that. You might feel that that Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. Okay, I'm not saying you're right and wrong, but from my own perspective, I take a fairly traditional view. I go with the traditional ruler, and as far as I'm concerned, the ruler of Aquarius, therefore your ruler, is Saturn. And so when the Sun is trine Saturn, that might well say something about relationships and how you manage them. And with this trine between the Sun and Saturn, this might mean that you can start the month on quite a good footing. And if you make some effort to be nice, to get on with people, I think that you can be rewarded. Maybe you will be rewarded. But there is something else going on. We have the North Node moving into your sign. Now, there is a slight difference between the true North Node and the mean North Node. I like to use the true North Node, and right at the beginning of the month, the true North Node is in Aquarius. I think the mean North Node is still in Pisces, because remember, the North Node always sort of goes backwards. The mean North Node certainly always goes backwards. The true North Node does go backwards, but it kind of zigzags. Sometimes it goes forward, sometimes it goes backwards, but the general trend is backwards. And the North Node, in Aquarius, says something about what is important, what matters, what you should be focusing on. And so when the North Node is in Aquarius, it's really saying that you should be focusing on yourself, not in a selfish way, but because you have so much to offer and you do not want to be watered down, for example, by compromise, by giving in to social inputs. And so, you might think that there's a bit of a contradiction here. I have just been talking about relationships and how this can be a time when you should be perhaps putting a lot of energy into relationships. But then on the other hand, I've just mentioned the fact that you need to be independent. So you've kind of got to deal with both sides of things. You have to accept that other people exist. You have to give them a degree of consideration. You have to listen to what they're saying. You have to not feel that you always have to get into an argument. And perhaps, additionally, you can compromise on the small things, the things that don't necessarily matter. And at the same time, it's just important to understand what makes people tick, because it makes you stronger. It means that you can anticipate what people are going to do next. And, all the while, deep down, fundamentally, with the North Node in Aquarius, you should, I believe, and can look after your own interests. And, as the month develops, we see that the lunation cycle is developing. In fact, the month starts with a waning moon. The moon has. We had a full moon at the end of July, and now things are starting to wind down. And when you've got a waning moon, it's kind of a time when you shouldn't necessarily start new projects. You should hold on and take stock of what has already happened, and it is all pointing towards this new moon, the next new moon, the first new moon in August, which happens on the 12th, August the 12th. And this new moon is special because it is a total eclipse, and it is a total eclipse in a Leo. In other words, it's a total eclipse in your opposite sign. And so when you've got a total eclipse in your opposite sign, a new moon eclipse, this might again refer to what is going on in relationships. That's what the opposite sign is often about. And it could be very simple. It could be the beginning of a new relationship. I don't know what that new relationship is about, but it could be something practical. It could be something short term. But I really do think that you are in a position to make the most of other people, and maybe there are just particular people who you have things in common with them, and there might be shared interests, shared aims, and if you can sort of bring them together, I think that this really would be very positive. And again, it goes back to your sense of your own independence. Perhaps you need to just realize that you just can't do things yourself all the time, and just by bringing someone else in, someone who you might not know about them yet. I mean, the new moon eclipse might represent someone new turning up, or it could be about an existing relationship which has a new phase. Now, that new phase could be anything. Okay, in some respects, it could be about an ending. It might be the case with this new moon, you kind of realize what you want from a relationship, and perhaps an existing relationship just isn't good enough. And in extreme situations it might end, or perhaps a change is required, and perhaps you have to be quite tough about this. But I do think that the new moon is a positive, but you have to be very aware, very very self-aware, because of this new moon in your opposite sign. And it's just about, it can be about things going on which at first you think are nothing to do with you. it's someone else's problem. Maybe you blame someone else, but yeah, you're not connected with it. But I think with this new moon, it is quite possible that you actually are connected with it, and so you need to be, ready to see the linkages here, and that really does mean that you have to be honest with yourself. Now, another thing about August is that Jupiter and Saturn are forming a trine. So I've already discussed the fact that Jupiter is in Leo, and Saturn, your ruler, is in Aries, and so with Saturn in Aries, that says something about you. Okay, you could say that Saturn in Aries, well, Saturn isn't the greatest place, so Aries is not the greatest place for Saturn to be, so, at times you might feel a sort of bit out of sorts, and that could have been the case, since February, the middle of February, when Saturn moved out of Pisces and into Aries, so you might have felt, a bit disconnected, but Jupiter is moving towards a trine of Saturn, and I think that this trine really is fortunate, and it can really help you see things, in a different way. And one thing about Saturn is, recently it turned retrograde. So I think it was in July. It was going forward, through Pisces, got to sort of 14 something Pisces. Sorry, not Pisces, Aries. It was going through Aries. It got to nearly 15 degrees Aries, and then it came to a standstill, and now it is becoming retrograde. And so, part of you, Aquarius, is just feeling a little bit uncertain. What do you do next? But then Jupiter comes along. Jupiter makes that trine to Saturn, and this trine between Jupiter and Saturn develops over the course of August, and I think that it becomes exact, I think, on the last day of August the 31st, and so this trine just makes you feel more and more confident that you actually know what is going on, and that something is looking after you. So if there are moments of confusion, over the course of a month, don't worry. You kind of do know what's going on, deep down. And if you are feeling confused, it may be that a lot of other people are feeling confused as well. So, there is certainly no need to worry too much. So, in fact, there's no need to worry at all. Now, right at the end of a month, we get a square between Mars and Saturn. So Mars is in Cancer. It moves into Cancer, I think, on the 11th of August, and from then on it moves towards a square of Saturn, your ruler, and that's something that perhaps you need to think about. And Mars can be an irritating influence. Something just might be bothering you, and it might be kind of disturbing your peace of mind. And what this square could be about is you wanting to ignore something. But if you ignore it, it doesn't really go away. And so if you ignore something, you could just feel frustrated. You're trying to get things done, you're trying to make things happen, but it's just increasingly not working, at the end of August, because you're not aware of what's going on. But if you were to be aware of what was going on, if you were to identify the problem, perhaps see where you've made a mistake in the past, or there could be just something in your life that is a bit of a mess and you're refusing to acknowledge it, well, yeah, it's going to just continue to mess you up. On the other hand, if you do address the problem with this Mars square Saturn, you can completely reverse the meaning of the aspect. For one thing, you are honoring the aspect. You tell yourself, there is Mars square Saturn. You're going to do something about it. You're going to identify the issue, and you're going to work towards sorting it out. And this can help you on many different levels, not just in terms of organization, but also in terms of the way you feel psychologically, and perhaps physically as well. Maybe with this Mars square Saturn, you could have been ignoring your body. Perhaps your body was telling you something, but you should have been, looking after yourself more. You perhaps had just been living in your mind, and you just assumed your body would just do what it was told. Now, if you take that attitude, you might be running into trouble, but there's no need. And so if you have an organized and careful approach, at the end of August, then I think that things will really work out. And I think that by doing what is required, you will be looked after. Pisces. Jupiter is ruler of Pisces, at least as far as I'm concerned. Some people think that Neptune rules Pisces. I mean, it is a bit of a modernism. For several thousand years, the general view was that Jupiter was the ruler of Pisces, and that's how the astrological system developed. And so, I don't see any need to change that. And so, if we want to know what's happening to Pisces, one should spend some time looking at Jupiter, seeing what Jupiter is doing. And obviously throughout the month, indeed until July 2027, Jupiter, it stays in Leo. And additionally, we have the Sun in Leo as well. So there's kind of a double dose of Leo here. And the Sun in Leo sort of emphasizes the fact that Jupiter is in Leo. Jupiter is in a fire sign. And it might be sort of disconcerting at first to think that you've got your ruler in a fire sign. Jupiter is quite a dynamic sign, and it's looking for action. And in a fire sign, Jupiter can be quite sort of intuitive, and it's important to think about what it means to be intuitive. Intuitive is not the same as being sensitive. I mean, you associate sensitivity with the water signs. Indeed, with Pisces, intuition is more about the fire signs. It's what you understand. Something might become, in an instant, you just have this immediate knowledge. It just all makes sense straight away without having to think about it. And with Jupiter in Leo, it becomes very obvious to you how things should be done, how things should be worked through, how things should be organized. And if something is disordered, is not going to work, it will just be immediately obvious to you. So, you can look through the surface details and straight away, understand how it really works and how it needs to be done. So I think that is a good thing, and it also gives you a certain discipline. Sometimes with Pisces, you can be sort of all over the place and you're not quite sure how things should fit together, and you go with the flow. But with Jupiter in Leo, you just know. Really, you just know. And with the Sun in Leo as well, I think that really emphasizes the point. But beginning of August, we do have a conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter. And, this Sun-Jupiter conjunction probably lasts, for the first week of August. And it could be problematic because, the Sun conjunctions are known as being about combustion. The Sun can burn things up. And so there might be just something that is kind of overwhelming you with the Sun conjunct Jupiter. And, what might you be overwhelmed by? You might be overwhelmed by, all of the things that just appear to be around you that you don't understand. You don't know how it all fits together. You don't know what to do. And you will be confused until you see how it all connects. And you have this awareness of this connection, in an instant. and perhaps you're pondering it, and it just all seems hopeless. And then suddenly you get it, and that might resolve the issue of Sun conjunct Jupiter. And another thing going on in August, throughout the month of August, is that there is a trine between Jupiter and Saturn. So the month starts with Jupiter at 7 degrees Leo, Saturn at 7 degrees Aries. So Jupiter and Saturn are 7 degrees apart. Sorry, did I say a conjunction? I meant to say a trine. But Jupiter and Saturn are making a trine to each other. And so they're 7 degrees away from this trine, from this exact trine. And as August unfolds, this trine gets closer and closer, and I think that this trine becomes exact on the last day of August. And so you are moving closer and closer to Saturn, moving closer and closer to this trine of Saturn. I think this is a positive. I think Saturn is going to really help you in terms of giving you a sense of discipline, and being able to really sort of work things out, and also recognizing what needs to be done. You might, for example, have been in a position where you didn't really want to consider something like money. You thought money was someone else's problem, but with this Jupiter trine Saturn, you're thinking, actually, this is something that needs to be resolved. And I think that by the end of August, you might have a clearer idea about what needs to be done financially to give yourself a degree of security. So that I think is something very positive. And then in the middle of the month as well, we have a sextile between Venus and Jupiter. So this Venus Jupiter sextile is on the 17th. So we have Venus in Libra making a sextile to Jupiter. Now, both those two planets are fortunate. And, both these planets kind of have a connection with Pisces because, Venus is exalted in Pisces, Jupiter rules Pisces. So when they're in sextile aspect to one another, that is, immediately fortunate. And, Venus is in Libra. Venus is in its own sign. So that sextile on the 17th could just be lucky. I mean, it might be as simple as that. Just, good fortune, things just working. Although, Venus is, of course, a natural planet of relationships. And so perhaps with Venus sextile Jupiter, you have a chance to find the right kind of person. And, because it's a sextile, we're talking about a bit of effort. Sextile is not a directly easy aspect. It's not completely straightforward. It's just with a bit of work and a bit of give and take. I think that you and someone else can really find a good way of cooperating. At the very least. But even if it's not about relationships, having Venus sextile Jupiter, your ruler, it's just generally lucky. And in fact, just before this sextile, we had a conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter. This Mercury-Jupiter conjunction was on 14th. And so you could say that Mercury conjunct Jupiter, Venus sextile Jupiter is kind of roughly happening at the same time in the middle of August. And Mercury conjunct Jupiter is a classic aspect for relationships because Jupiter is ruler of Pisces, Mercury is ruler of Virgo, your opposite sign. So if Mercury and Jupiter are conjunct, that really does indicate that you and another person can kind of occupy the same place. Maybe you have the same view, or you have the same priorities. So yeah, from a relationship perspective, I do think mid-August does look pretty good. Now, moving to the end of August, and things do change. We have planets moving into Virgo. For example, we have the Sun moving into Virgo on the 22nd or 23rd, and then we have Mercury moving into Virgo a bit later. I think that's on the 25th. So with two planets moving into Virgo, that means two planets moving into your opposite sign. And again, we've got this theme of relationships, because Virgo is your opposite sign, and you perhaps become aware of what other people are doing, and you have to consider perhaps the various relationships you're in, and work out what is the best stance, and maybe a relationship needs to be adjusted, especially as we have a full moon eclipse, and this full moon eclipse is on the 28th. And in fact, it is a partial eclipse. And so what you've got with this full moon eclipse is you have got the moon in Pisces in your sign, and you've got the sun in Virgo. So that is right across the main axis of your chart. And this eclipse, again, more going on in terms of relationships. And when you're dealing with a full moon, it can just be about awareness. You see what things are really like. You see the truth of the matter. And perhaps you didn't want to see the truth, but it's there. It's right in front of you. Not just about relationships, but perhaps about a lot of other things. And maybe you had been in denial, or you hadn't seen the full picture. But I think the full moon makes the truth available. And, if you prepared to accept this truth and be honest with yourself, then I think that you will definitely be able to benefit, and I think that your life will perhaps shed some dead wood, and you can start thinking about the next stage, whatever that next stage might be. So do think about that full moon right at the end of August, and perhaps that defines the end of August. And so the end of August is a time for seeing the truth and acting on the basis of the truth. So those are my forecasts for August 2026 for the 12 signs. And now I want to turn to the I Ching. So remember with this I Ching that it is optional. If you do not want your I Ching to be read, you can just stop watching this video now. I mean, assuming you've got this far. I mean, I know it's a pretty long video, even by my standards. But if you don't want your I Ching done, you don't have to have it done. You can just you can stop right here, and because this I Ching is only for those of you who watch the I Ching section. Anyway, so I asked the I Ching this question: what is August 2026 going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 64. This is the last hexagram in the book. So the I Ching has 64 hexagrams, and before completion is the last. And the imagery of before completion is about crossing a river. There's a big river. We've got to cross it, and it gives us the idea of moving from one stage to another. It's like being on a journey, and this is the final bit. And it's not easy. Crossing a big river is difficult. I'm certainly not advocating that you cross big rivers or any form of river. That is certainly a dangerous, hazardous thing to do. So it is something symbolic, and things can go wrong. We can fall in the water, we can get sucked under, we can not pay attention. Even when we're getting very, very close to the far bank, we can lose our concentration, and we can come a cropper. Now, there are two moving lines here. The second line moves, and so does the fourth. And with the second line moving, that indicates that you are trying to make a transition in August, and you run into trouble. And the image we get is of a sort of a cart or some vehicle braking. So you apply the brakes before you go too far. So you might imagine this huge river. You put your cart into the river. You're getting ready to cross the river, and then you decide that maybe valor is a better part of discretion, and you better just stop what you're doing. And so that is the first impulse, to just stop. Not forever, but because perhaps you just weren't ready to make the transition. And that might be saying something about the beginning of August. Yeah, you were ready for a change, but it just wasn't quite the right time. And then the fourth line moves, and the fourth line, I mean, it's not a bad line, but it's quite aggressive. The Wilhelm translation of I Ching talks about disciplining the devil's country. It's like you've got a task ahead of you, and you're dealing with difficult elements, perhaps even sort of evil elements. And once you have decided to go through with it, well, you've just got to continue. It's certainly not easy, but you've got to keep going. And yeah, it means a lot of work. In fact, the Wilhelm translation talks about it taking 3 years. I'm not saying it's going to take 3 years, because we're just talking about August. Maybe if we're talking about August, maybe it'll take 3 weeks. But it requires a lot of perseverance, and you've got to recognize that there are dangerous elements out there, that you cannot be complacent. And because we got 2 moving lines, this means that we move to a second hexagram. And the second hexagram we move to is hexagram number 23, which is splitting apart. Now, this is a somewhat difficult hexagram, at least on the face of it. It means that things are falling apart. One of the sort of imagery you can get with splitting apart might be, I don't know, a piece of furniture, and the termites are eating through the whole thing, and it's just collapsing. And you can see this image in the hexagram, that this structure looks really unstable. And this might say something about what is going on before completion. What are you trying to do? Perhaps you're trying to break from something, and maybe this is what splitting apart actually means. You have really had enough. You know that you have to keep moving. Okay, in the previous hexagram, the second line, there is a time when you need to break, but the fourth line is about persevering. So you persevere, and you recognize that something is coming to an end, and it may say something about people, places, situations that you recognize they are no good for you. And you can't really realistically have a big fight with them. You've just got to move on. And perhaps, in the end, with splitting apart, that might be, the forces of evil, the forces of disintegration, they sort of eat themselves up and they collapse. And from then on, you're able to move forward, and you are able to complete the task. And perhaps what is holding you back is just too many ties with the past. People who are just hanging on, situations that you can't say goodbye to, and it's just preventing you from moving forward. But once you make that split, you have made that transition, and that means perhaps that you've actually succeeded in being able to cross to the other bank, that you have really made the transition. And that's it. That's all I've got to say. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description. And I hope you have a great August.